Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. My name is Noah. I'm 34. The water at Osceola National Forest in northern Florida reflected my face, but it smiled. I'd driven my beaten RV down from Atlanta 3 days before Halloween, looking for solitude after the divorce papers finally cleared. The rig was a 1987 Winnebago Chieftain that leaked when it rained and smelled perpetually of old carpet and propane. But it was mine. Karen had kept the house, the good car, and most of our friends. I got the RV my father left me and a checking account that wouldn't survive another month of her lawyer's fees. Osceola National Forest wasn't my first choice. I'd wanted somewhere mountainous, somewhere cold where I could watch my breath and feel winter coming. But gas prices and my dwindling savings had made the decision for me. Florida's panhandle forests would have to do. The ranger station directed me to a primitive camping area near Ocean Pond, a dark lake surrounded by longleaf pines and cypress trees draped in Spanish moss. The kind of place fishermen loved and everyone else avoided. I pulled into my spot just after 4 in the afternoon. The light was already going amber through the trees, that golden autumn glow that made everything look like an old photograph. 3 other camping spots dotted the area, but all were empty. The ranger, a weathered woman in her 50s with sun-damaged skin and suspicious eyes, had told me I'd probably have the place to myself until the weekend. "People don't much like this section," she'd said, not looking up from her paperwork. "Gets buggy. Cell service is shit. And the pond." She'd paused, finally meeting my eyes. "Just don't go in the water after dark." I'd laughed, thinking it was some local joke. She hadn't laughed back. The first evening passed uneventfully. I set up my fold-out chair, cracked open a warm beer from the cooler I'd forgotten to plug in, and watched the sun sink behind the tree line. The pond stretched out before me, maybe a quarter-mile across, its surface perfectly still. Mirror still, unnaturally still now that I think back on it. I saw my reflection in that water as I stood at the edge, beer in hand, watching the light die. The face looking back was mine. Same receding hairline, same tired eyes, same beard I'd grown to hide the weight I'd lost from stress. But as I stared, the reflection's mouth curved into a smile. Not my smile. I wasn't smiling. I was just standing there, numb and tired, watching daylight bleed away. I blinked and the smile was gone. Just my own haggard face looking back, as miserable as I felt. Too much driving, I told myself. Too many sleepless nights in the lawyer's offices. Too many pills for anxiety that left me feeling disconnected from my own skin. I went back to the RV and heated up a can of chili on the propane stove. Ate it straight from the pot, sitting in the driver's seat with the door open, listening to the forest settle into night. The sounds were different here than in the Georgia mountains I knew. Wetter, somehow. Things moved in the underbrush with slithering sounds rather than rustling. Frogs called in deep, resonant croaks. Somewhere far off, an owl asked its eternal question. I fell asleep in my clothes, still sitting in the driver's seat, and dreamed of drowning. The second day started wrong. I woke with my neck kinked and my mouth tasting like copper. When I looked in the small bathroom mirror, my face was pale, almost gray in the dim light filtering through the RV's grimy windows. I splashed water on my face from the hand pump. The water system had stopped working somewhere in Georgia, and tried to shake off the feeling of wrongness that clung to me like humidity. Outside, the morning was overcast. Low clouds pressed down on the forest, turning everything gray and flat. The pond had changed overnight. Where it had been mirror-smooth the evening before, now its surface rippled constantly, as if something large moved just beneath. But there was no wind. The air hung dead and heavy, not even enough breeze to stir the Spanish moss. I made coffee on the propane stove and carried it down to the water's edge, trying to convince myself I was enjoying this, that solitude was what I needed. But the pond bothered me. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, watching the water move in patterns that didn't make sense. Ripples would start at the center and spread outward, perfect circles like something had broken the surface. But nothing ever breached. Nothing jumped. The ripples just came, one after another, regular as a heartbeat. I was about to head back when I saw it, my reflection in the water distorted by the ripples. But between the distortions, in the brief moments of clarity, I could see the reflection looking at me. Not looking back, the way a reflection should. Looking at me. Its eyes tracked my movements a half-second too slow, as if it had to think about matching my actions. And it was still smiling. I stumbled backward, hot coffee sloshing over my hand. When I looked again, the water was just water, dark and rippling and empty of anything but broken light. "Fuck this," I said aloud. My voice sounded thin in the dead air. I decided to drive into town. The RV coughed and sputtered but eventually started, and I navigated the dirt roads back to the highway. The nearest town was Olustee, barely a wide spot in the road with a gas station, a bait shop, and a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. I filled the tank and went into the diner. 3 locals sat at the counter, all men in their 60s or older, all turning to stare when I walked in. The waitress, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes and dyed red hair, smiled and gestured to a booth. "You the fellow camping out at Ocean Pond?" she asked, pouring coffee without asking if I wanted any. "How'd you know?" "Janet at the ranger station called. Said you looked like you needed looking after." She set down a laminated menu. "Breakfast special's good. Comes with grits." I ordered without looking at the menu and sat there trying to figure out what "looked like you needed looking after" meant. The locals had gone back to their conversation, something about property taxes and a proposed development that would never happen. I drank my coffee and tried to ignore the way they occasionally glanced at me in the mirror behind the counter. The waitress brought my food, eggs, bacon, toast, and a bowl of grits that was bigger than my head. As she set it down, she lowered her voice. "You seeing things out there yet?" I looked up sharply. "What?" "At the pond. People see things. It's why we don't send folks there unless all the other spots are full, and even then," she glanced back at the men at the counter, "my husband used to fish there. Good base fishing. But one evening he came home and wouldn't talk about it. Packed up all his gear, sold it at a yard sale, never went near that pond again. This was 15 years ago. He died last winter, and with his last breath he told me, 'The water shows you what you are.' I don't understand." "Neither do I, honey, but maybe you should consider camping somewhere else. There's a nice RV park about 20 miles south. Full hookups, Wi-Fi, the works." I thanked her, left a generous tip, and drove back to the forest. I don't know why. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or maybe just the fact that running away from an unsettling reflection seemed crazy, and I'd been called crazy enough during the divorce. The afternoon was worse than the morning. The overcast sky had lowered even further, pressing down until the forest felt like the inside of a coffin. I tried to read a paperback thriller I'd picked up at a truck stop, but I kept reading the same paragraph over and over, unable to focus. The RV felt smaller somehow, more cramped. The walls seemed closer together. Around 4 o'clock I heard a sound. A child crying. Distant, coming from the direction of the pond. I stood up so fast I hit my head on the low ceiling. The crying continued. A lost, desperate sound that pulled at something deep in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight, though it was still light out, and headed toward the water. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone there? Are you okay?" The crying stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the sound had been. I reached the edge of the pond. The water had gone completely still again, and that same mirror finish I'd seen the first evening. And there, in the reflection, I saw myself standing at the water's edge. But I also saw a child behind me. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair and pale skin, and eyes that were too large for his face. I spun around. Nothing. No one. Just trees and Spanish moss and gray light. When I looked back at the water, the child was still there in the reflection, standing right behind where I should be, and my reflection was smiling at him. Smiling that wrong smile, too wide, stretching my face into something that wasn't quite human. I ran back to the RV and locked the doors, sat in the driver's seat with my hands shaking and my heart hammering against my ribs. This was crazy. I was seeing things. Stress hallucinations, maybe, or carbon monoxide from the propane system. Yes, that made sense. That was logical. I found the carbon monoxide detector I'd bought but never installed and put in fresh batteries. It didn't go off. The air was fine, but I wasn't fine. I tried calling my brother, but there was no signal. The ranger had been right about that. I thought about driving back out to town, finding a motel, getting the hell away from this place, but it was getting dark fast now. That premature twilight that comes with heavy clouds, and the thought of driving those narrow dirt roads in the dark made my stomach clench. I'd stay in the RV, lock the doors, maybe try to sleep. In the morning, I'd pack up and leave. Fuck the wasted camp fees. Night fell like a curtain dropping. One moment there was gray light. The next, there was nothing. I turned on the RV's interior lights, which flickered and dimmed. The battery was dying, and tried to eat some crackers and cheese. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's when I heard the knocking. 3 taps, slow and deliberate, on the RV's door. I froze. Hello? 3 more taps. Same rhythm. Patient. Waiting. Who's there? Silence. Then a voice muffled through the door. Noah. My name. In my voice. My exact voice. Same inflection I used when I was tired. Same slight rasp from years of smoking that I'd quit 5 years ago but never quite disappeared. This isn't funny, I said, trying to sound brave, sounding terrified instead. Noah. Again in my voice. Let me in. I'm so cold out here. Go away. I can't go away. I live here now. I've always lived here. Don't you remember? A pause. Don't you remember drowning? I didn't remember drowning because I'd never drowned. I'd never even had a close call with water. I was a decent swimmer. I'd grown up near lakes and rivers and had never feared water. Until now. Noah, look at your hands. I didn't want to look, but I did. My hands, shaking in my lap, looked wrong in the dim light. The skin seemed too pale, almost translucent. I could see the veins beneath, dark and branching like underwater plants. And there, under my fingernails, was dirt, black dirt, wet dirt, grave dirt. Some awful part of my brain whispered, Noah, look in the mirror. No. Look in the mirror, see what you are. I turned my head slowly toward the bathroom. The door was open. I could see the small mirror above the sink, barely visible in the bad light. I could see a shape in the mirror. A figure. Standing in the bathroom of my RV, even though the bathroom was empty, even though I was sitting in the driver's seat 10 feet away. The figure was smiling. I lunged for the driver's seat, keys in hand, turned the ignition. The RV coughed but didn't start. Tried again. Nothing. Again. The engine turned over once, twice, then died completely. The battery, already weak, gave up entirely. The interior lights went out. Darkness. Complete darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, found it, clicked it on. The beam fell on the bathroom mirror. The figure was still there, clearer now. It was me. Exactly me. But the clothes were wrong. They were soaked, dripping water that didn't fall, frozen in time. The face was bloated, skin loose and gray, eyes milky white, mouth open in a smile that showed too many teeth, teeth that had come loose from the gums. A drowned corpse. My drowned corpse. Noah, my voice said from outside, patient and terrible. You've been in the water for 3 days. It's time to stop pretending. I screamed. Actually screamed. Something I hadn't done since childhood. The sound bounced around the small RV interior, and in the bathroom mirror the corpse's mouth opened wider, matching my scream. I threw myself at the side door, the one opposite where the voice had been, fumbled with the lock, yanked it open, fell out into the night, scrambled to my feet and ran blindly into the forest, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me. Behind me, I heard splashing. Wet footsteps, something that had been underwater for too long, following me through the trees. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs trembled, ran until I crashed into something solid and fell backward, landing hard on the ground. The flashlight flew from my hand and went out, rolling somewhere in the darkness. I lay there gasping, waiting for the wet hands to close around my throat, but nothing came. Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Not complete darkness. There was ambient light from somewhere. The moon, maybe, breaking through the clouds. I could see shapes, trees, Spanish moss hanging like corpse hair, and water. I'd run in a circle, back to the pond. No, not back. I'd never left. The RV was right there, maybe 30 feet away. I could see its pale bulk in the darkness. I'd run in circles and my corpse had been right. I'd never left the water. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the pond's edge. The water was still, perfect mirror still. And in that mirror, I saw myself. Dry clothes, normal skin, living. But when I raised my hand to touch my face, the reflection didn't move. It just smiled. "Hello, Noah," it said, speaking without speaking, the words appearing directly in my head. "I've been waiting for you to understand." Understand what? My voice came out as a whisper. "You came here to disappear. The papers said you were despondent, depressed. You told your brother you needed time alone. Nobody would look for you, not for weeks. Long enough." Long enough for what? To drown. To let go. To slip under the water and just stop. The reflection's smile widened. "You did it the first night. Don't you remember? The dreams of drowning weren't dreams. You walked into this pond at midnight and you kept walking. The water was warm, like bath water. Easy. Peaceful. No, but even as I said it, I felt the memory surfacing. The sensation of water closing over my head. The strange relief of finally giving up. The burning in my lungs that had faded to numbness, then to nothing. "Your body is down there," the reflection said, gesturing to the depths below. 20 feet down, caught in the weeds. The real you. What you're experiencing now, this walking and running and fear, that's just the water's dream. The pond dreams through the people it takes. It's dreaming you now. "I'm alive," I said, but my voice had no conviction. "Are you? Then explain the dirt under your nails. Explain why you can't leave. Explain why your reflection does what it wants." The thing wearing my face leaned closer to the water's surface. "Explain why you're so cold, Noah. When was the last time you felt warm?" I couldn't remember. I'd been cold since I woke up. That bone-deep chill that no amount of sun could fix. "Others will come," the reflection said. "They'll find your RV. They'll search. Eventually they'll drag the pond and find you. But until then, you're mine. The water's. You'll stand here every night and watch people camp. You'll smile at them from their mirrors. You'll call to them in their own voices. And one by one, you'll bring them down here to join us. Because that's what the pond does. It shows you what you are, and what you are is drowned." "No," I said again, more firmly this time. "If I was dead, I wouldn't be scared. I wouldn't feel anything. Wouldn't you?" The reflection tilted its head. "Have you felt anything else these past 3 days? Any hunger? Any real pain? Or just cold and confusion and the certainty that something is wrong?" I thought about it. The beer I'd drunk had tasted like nothing. The chili had been flavorless. Even the coffee this morning had been just heat and bitterness, no actual taste. And yes, I'd been cold. So cold. "The waitress saw you," I said desperately. "In town. I talked to her. Did she see you? Or did she see an empty booth and humor the crazy person talking to themselves?" The reflection's expression softened into something almost pitying. "Janet at the ranger station called ahead because she saw your name on the registration. Noah Vance. They found that name in the database, matched it to a missing persons report filed 2 weeks ago by your brother. That's what she was really calling about. They were watching to see if you'd show up somewhere. 2 weeks. But I'd only been here 3 days, hadn't I? Time moves differently in the water's dream," the reflection said. "What feels like days are really minutes. You've been down there for weeks, Noah. Your brother's looking for you. Your ex-wife feels guilty. They'll find you eventually. But until then, you're caught between. The drowned in between. I sank to my knees at the water's edge. In the reflection, the other me knelt too, but its smile never wavered. "There's a way out," it said softly. "One way? What? Bring another. Let someone else take your place. The pond needs to dream. It needs to feed. Give it someone else and you can wake up. Crawl out of the weeds. Breathe again. I won't. You will. You'll stand here tomorrow night when another camper arrives. There's a couple coming. 2 young lovers running away from their own problems. And you'll smile at them from their reflections. You'll call to them in their voices. You'll bring them down here because that's what you are now. That's what the pond made you. I'd rather stay dead. You don't have that choice anymore. The pond decides." The reflection began to sink backward, descending into the water without creating ripples. "Welcome home, Noah. Welcome to the water's dream." And then I was alone, kneeling at the edge of the pond with nothing but my own reflection staring back. Normal now. No smile. Just my face, haggard and pale and cold. So cold. I stood and walked back to the RV. The door hung open where I'd left it. Inside, nothing had changed. My things were where I'd left them. The mirrors showed only ordinary reflections. I sat in the driver's seat and tried the ignition. The RV started on the first try, battery suddenly working, engine purring like it had been perfectly maintained. I could drive away, right now, leave this place and never come back. But where would I go? What was I now? I turned off the engine and sat in the darkness, listening to the pond outside, listening to it breathe and ripple and dream. And I knew, with terrible certainty, that the reflection had been telling the truth. I'd been down in those weeds for weeks, drowned and dreaming, and this walking around version of me was just another phantom the water had conjured. I was the ghost haunting my own life. Morning came eventually, though I hadn't slept. The sun rose through clouds that never fully broke, painting everything in shades of gray and silver. I walked down to the water and looked at my reflection one more time. It waved at me. I didn't wave back. 2 days later, or 2 hours, or 2 minutes, time had stopped meaning anything. A car pulled into the camping area. An old Honda Civic with a kayak strapped to the roof. A young couple got out, maybe mid-20s, laughing about something. She had red hair and freckles. He had a beard and kind eyes. They set up their tent near the water's edge, close enough to dip their toes in while they sat and talked. I watched them from the RV, watched them unpack their gear, watched them start a fire as evening fell, watched the girl walk down to the pond to wash her hands, and I saw her kneel at the water's edge and look down at her reflection. I saw her reflection smile at her. Not her smile, a different smile. Too wide. She frowned, confused, and looked more closely. Her reflection waved. She hadn't waved. "Mark," she called to her boyfriend, "come look at this." He came over laughing. "What?" "Look at the water. Do you see anything weird?" They both stared at their reflections. The reflections stared back, both smiling now, both wrong. And then both reflections spoke, though their mouths didn't move, the words appearing directly in the couple's heads. "Come in. The water's fine. We've been waiting for you." The couple stumbled backward, but I could see it in their faces. The confusion, the doubt, the creeping certainty that something was wrong with them, not the water. They'd be back. Tonight, or tomorrow, or the night after. The pond was patient. The pond always won. I'm still here, still in the RV that won't leave, still in the forest that won't let me go. The ranger's station shows my spot is permanently occupied, though when people call to ask about availability, they hear that it's empty. No one can agree. Schrodinger's campsite, simultaneously full and vacant. Sometimes other people come. Sometimes they see me standing by the water. Sometimes they see my RV. Other times I'm invisible. Just another trick of the light on the surface of Ocean Pond. The water decides what people see. The water decides everything. There are others here with me now. The couple came into the water on their 3rd night. I heard them splashing, heard them giggle at first, then gasp, then nothing. Their car sat in the parking area for 6 days before a park ranger towed it. Their bodies are down there with mine, caught in the weeds, dreaming the water's dream. We stand together sometimes, the three of us, looking at our reflections in the pond. We don't talk. What would we say? We're all the same now, all drowned, all dreaming, all waiting for the next person to come camp by this dark water so we can smile at them from their mirrors and call to them in their own voices. My brother came once, 2 months after I disappeared. I watched him talk to the rangers, watched him walk down to the pond and stare at the water. He looked so tired, so worried. I wanted to call out to him, to tell him I was sorry, to tell him I loved him, but the water wouldn't let me. The water only lets me speak to the ones it wants, the ones it's chosen to drown. He stood there for an hour, just staring at the water. At one point he wiped tears from his eyes. Then he left, and I never saw him again. Sometimes I wonder if I can still feel, if the cold that never leaves me is feeling, or just the memory of feeling. If the guilt that sits in my chest like a stone is guilt, or just the weight of the water pressing down on my drowned lungs. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters but the pond and its hunger and its dreams. Tonight is Halloween. The forest is quiet. No one comes camping in the Osceola National Forest on Halloween. People have better places to be, better things to do. But tomorrow is November 1st, and the weather will be beautiful, and people will come. They always come, and we'll be waiting. I'm Noah. I'm 34, and the water at Osceola National Forest reflected my face and smiled. And now I smile back, because that's what the drowned do. We smile, and we wait, and we dream the water's dream until the next person comes to join us in the dark. The pond is patient. The pond always wins, and somewhere, 20 feet down in the weeds and the mud, my real body floats and dreams of breathing, while this walking shadow wearing my face stands at the water's edge and watches for headlights on the dirt road. Waiting, always waiting. Because the water shows you what you are, and what I am is drowned. Story 2. My name is Mia. I'm 32. The ground at Kisatchie National Forest trembled when I stepped on it. I noticed it first when I climbed down from the RV that Saturday afternoon in late September, my boots hitting the packed earth of the primitive camping area off Forest Road 321. The sensation traveled up through my soles, a subtle vibration, almost imperceptible, like standing on the hood of a car with the engine idling. I stood there for a moment, one hand still gripping the RV's door handle, testing my weight on each foot. The tremor pulsed in irregular intervals. I told myself it was my imagination, or maybe underground springs, or the geological quirks of central Louisiana's Pine Barrens. "You coming or what?" Derek called from around the front of the RV. My boyfriend of 2 years had already started unhooking the tow bar from his truck, moving with the efficient movements of someone eager to set up camp and crack open a beer. "Yeah, sorry." I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and joined him, pushing the strange sensation from my mind. We'd driven 6 hours from Houston for this weekend, and I wasn't about to let weird feelings ruin our first real vacation in months. Kisatchie had been Derek's choice. He'd found the spot through some RV forum, an off-grid primitive site deep in the national forest, far from the designated campgrounds with their crowds and generator noise. Real camping, he'd called it, showing me photos of towering longleaf pines and the rolling hills covered in saw palmetto. The area was known for its remote wilderness trails and the wild, untouched beauty that Louisiana is so rarely credited for. What the forum posts hadn't mentioned was the silence. As Derek worked on leveling the RV and I started unpacking our supplies, I became acutely aware of how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, oppressive quiet. The kind that makes you conscious of your own breathing, your heartbeat, the rustle of your clothes. We were parked in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, their trunks stretching up like the columns of some ancient cathedral. The canopy filtered the afternoon light into greenish shadows. There should have been birdsong, wind through the needles. Something. Instead, there was just that persistent tremor in the ground. Feel that? I asked Derek as he adjusted the RV's stabilizing jacks. Feel what? The ground. It's vibrating. He paused, standing still for a moment, then shook his head. I don't feel anything. Maybe you're still sensing the road vibrations from the drive? Maybe. But 6 hours was a long time for that sensation to linger. I decided not to push it. Derek had been stressed lately. Long hours at his engineering firm, a difficult project that kept him up nights. This trip was supposed to help him decompress, and I didn't want to start things off by being the girlfriend who complained about weird feelings. We spent the next hour setting up camp. Derek ran the generator long enough to check that the RV's systems were working, then shut it off. We'd brought plenty of battery power, and the whole point was to disconnect. No cell service out here anyway. We'd lost our signal about 20 miles back near the town of Natchitoches. By the time we finished, the sun was starting its descent, painting the pine trunks in shades of amber and rust. I started preparing dinner on the RV's propane stove while Derek built a fire in the ring he'd constructed from stones he'd found around the clearing. That was when I noticed the trees. We were surrounded by longleaf pines, just as the photos had promised, but something about them seemed wrong. Not obviously wrong. Nothing I could put my finger on exactly. But as I looked at them through the RV's window, I realized they all seemed to lean slightly inward, toward our clearing. Like they were bent by prevailing winds, except the lean was uniform from all directions, all pointing at us. Dinner's ready, I called to Derek, trying to shake off the observation. We ate outside by the fire, grilled chicken and vegetables, simple camping food that tasted better in the open air. Derek seemed more relaxed already, the tension in his shoulders easing as he nursed a beer and stared into the flames. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling up toward the darkening sky. That was when I felt it again. The tremor, stronger this time. I was sitting in my camping chair, plate balanced on my knees, when the vibration came up through the chair's legs. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, a rolling pulse that made my teeth chatter slightly. I looked at Derek, but he was looking at his phone, probably checking to see if we'd somehow gotten a signal. Did you... I started. The trees moved, not swaying in wind. Moving, settling, like they were adjusting their positions, the massive trunks shifting with agonizing slowness. The sound was barely audible, a deep, creaking groan that I felt more than heard, resonating in my chest cavity. "Holy shit," Derek whispered. He'd seen it too. We both stood, our eyes scanning the tree line. The pines had stopped moving, but now I could see what I'd missed before. They were closer, not by much, maybe a foot or two, but definitely closer than they'd been when we first arrived. The clearing had shrunk. "That's not possible," Derek said, but his voice carried no conviction. "We should leave," I said immediately. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get back in the RV and drive. And go where? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's almost dark. Derek's engineering mind was trying to rationalize what we'd just witnessed. There has to be an explanation. Maybe the soil is unstable. Maybe there was a small earthquake and we're seeing settling. Trees don't settle, Derek. Neither do they move. So something else is happening that we don't understand. He sat back down, but I noticed he kept glancing at the tree line. Let's finish dinner. See what happens. If things get weirder, we'll leave first thing in the morning. I wanted to argue, but I also didn't want to drive back through 20 miles of dark forest roads, especially if the ground was genuinely unstable. I sat back down, but I'd lost my appetite. The chicken tasted like paste in my mouth. The sun finished setting, plunging the clearing into darkness broken only by our fire. Derek added more wood, building the flames higher. The light pushed back the shadows, creating a circle of warmth and visibility that felt fragile against the pressing dark. I found myself thinking about old fairy tales, about circles of salt and iron, about the human need to mark safe boundaries against the wild. Around 9 o'clock, Derek suggested we turn in. I was exhausted from the drive and the strange anxiety that had been building all evening. We doused the fire carefully. Derek was meticulous about forest fire safety and retreated into the RV. The interior felt safe, solid. Walls and a door with a lock, however flimsy. Derek checked the door twice before we got ready for bed. Neither of us mentioned the trees or the trembling ground. We brushed our teeth in silence, changed into sleep clothes, and climbed into the RV's small bed above the cab. I lay there in the darkness, listening. Derek's breathing gradually slowed and deepened beside me. The RV's battery-powered clock ticked on the wall. And underneath everything, so faint I might have imagined it, I heard a sound like breathing. Slow, rhythmic inhalations and exhalations that seemed to come from the ground itself. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke suddenly to absolute silence. The clock had stopped. Derek wasn't breathing beside me. No, wait, he was, but the sound was wrong. Too shallow, too fast. "Derek," I whispered. No response. I reached over to shake his shoulder and my hand passed through him. I jerked back with a gasp, scrambling for the light switch. But when my fingers found it and I flicked it on, nothing happened. The RV's battery was dead. Impossible. It had been fully charged and we'd barely used any power. In the darkness, Derek spoke, but his voice came from the wrong direction. Not from beside me in bed, but from outside the RV. "Mia, why did you leave me?" My blood went cold. I was suddenly absolutely certain that Derek was still beside me in bed. Whatever was outside wasn't him. "Mia, please, I'm scared. I don't know where I am." The voice was perfect. Derek's pitch, his cadence, even the slight Texas drawl he'd never quite lost. But it was coming from just outside the RV's door. The thing in the bed beside me stirred. I felt the mattress shift with its weight. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "Don't answer it," the thing beside me whispered. The voice was Derek's, but coming from the right direction this time. "Don't let it know you can hear it." The thing outside began to knock. Soft at first, then harder. The entire RV shook with each impact. "Mia, I need help. Something's wrong with the trees. They're—" The voice outside broke off in a scream that went on and on, rising in pitch until it didn't sound human anymore. Then it stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the screaming. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my own breathing. Eventually, gray dawn light began to filter through the RV's windows. The thing beside me in the bed resolved into Derek. The real Derek, I hoped, still sleeping, his face relaxed and peaceful. I slid out of bed carefully, trying not to wake him. My hands shook as I moved to the window and peered out through the curtains. The trees had moved again. They now formed a tight ring around the RV, their massive trunks only about 10 feet away in every direction. The clearing that had been maybe 40 feet across was now barely large enough for our vehicle, and in the narrow spaces between the trunks, I saw them. Shapes that might have been people standing perfectly still, watching. I couldn't see their faces in the dawn gloom. I didn't want to. "We need to leave," I said loudly, my voice cracking. "Derek, wake up. We need to leave right now." He groaned and rolled over. "What time is it?" "I don't care. We need to go." Something in my voice must have communicated my terror because Derek sat up immediately, suddenly alert. He looked at me, then at the windows, then his face went pale. "What the hell?" "Don't look too close at the shadows between the trees," I warned. "Just get dressed. We need to hook up the truck and drive out of here." We dressed in frantic silence, pulling on yesterday's clothes. Derek tried the RV's electrical system, but everything was dead. The battery that should have had days of power left was completely drained. Even the propane wouldn't light. When he tried the stove, nothing happened. "That doesn't make any sense," Derek muttered, checking the connections. "The propane isn't electrical. It should work. Nothing about this makes sense. Can we argue about physics later? When we're not here?" Derek grabbed his keys and we moved toward the door. I stopped him before he could open it. "Last night," I said, "something was outside. It sounded like you, but you were in bed. It knew my name." His face went even paler. "Jesus Christ, Mia. We need to run for the truck. Don't look at the trees. Don't look at anything in the shadows. Just run." He nodded. His hand was shaking when he reached for the door handle. "On 3, he said. 1, 2. On three, he yanked the door open and we burst out into the cool morning air. I'd expected to be grabbed immediately, but nothing stopped us. We ran the 15 feet to Derek's truck, our feet pounding on ground that pulsed with each step. Derek fumbled with the keys, dropped them, scooped them up, and finally got the driver's side door open. I ran around to the passenger side. That's when I saw what was between the trees. They weren't people, not exactly. They had the rough shape of humans, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but they were made of something else. Twisted roots and dried moss and pine needles, all woven together into approximations of bodies. Their faces were hollow places where faces should be, dark spaces that seemed to pull at my vision. One of them was wearing Derek's shirt, the one he'd been wearing yesterday. I screamed and threw myself into the truck. Derek already had the engine running. He threw it into reverse and hit the gas. The truck didn't move. Derek gunned the engine, the wheels spinning, but we remained stationary. He shifted to drive, then reverse again. Nothing. It was as if the truck were bolted to the ground. "No, no, no," Derek chanted, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The root people began to move, stepping out from between the trees. They moved wrong, joints bending at angles that weren't quite right, their gaits stuttering like stop-motion animation. They were all coming toward us. Derek. I know. He kept trying the gas, the transmission, anything. The engine roared, but we went nowhere. One of the root people reached the truck and placed its hand, if you could call it a hand, on the hood. Where it touched, the metal began to rust, spreading from the point of contact like frozen decay. "We have to run," I said. "Back to the RV. And then what?" "I don't know, but we can't stay here." We abandoned the truck and sprinted back to the RV. The root people didn't pursue us quickly, but they didn't need to. They knew we were trapped. We dove back inside and Derek slammed the door, engaging the flimsy lock. I immediately pulled all the curtains closed. I didn't want to see them gathering outside. "Okay," Derek said, breathing hard, trying to think. "Okay, we need to figure out what's happening. There has to be a rational explanation." "Rational?" I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. "Did you see those things? Did you feel the ground shaking? Maybe it's some kind of, I don't know, underground fungus, cordyceps or something. Maybe we're hallucinating. We can't both be hallucinating the same things, Derek. Then what? Magic? Monsters?" He ran his hands through his hair. "I'm an engineer. I solve problems. There has to be a solution." A sound interrupted him. A soft rustling that seemed to come from all around us. The RV began to shake, gently at first, then harder. Things fell from the cabinets. I grabbed onto the table to steady myself. Through the windows, even through the closed curtains, I could see the clearing growing darker. The trees were moving again, tightening their circle. And underneath us, the ground was definitely breathing now, rising and falling in slow, steady pulses. "The trees are going to crush us," I said. Derek was checking his phone again, desperate for a signal, for anything that connected to the normal world. Nothing, not even emergency calls. The rustling grew louder. Something scraped against the RV's exterior, a sound like nails on metal, but softer, more organic. Branches, I realized. The trees were touching the RV with their branches, and where they touched I could hear a slow corrosion, like acid eating through metal. "We need to find another way out," Derek said. He was moving through the RV now, checking windows. "There has to be a gap, a direction where the trees are farther apart." I joined him, carefully peeling back curtains to look out. The root people were still there, standing perfectly still now, forming a second circle outside the ring of trees. Watching, waiting. But on the western side of the RV, the trees were fractionally farther apart, maybe 3 feet instead of 2. A gap a person might squeeze through. "There," I said, pointing. Derek looked, calculated. "If we can get through there, we might be able to make it to the forest road." It was only about a quarter mile away. And then what? Walk 20 miles to the nearest town? "You have a better idea?" I didn't. The RV was dying around us. I could hear it in the creaking of the frame, smell it in the acrid scent of corroding metal. Whatever was happening here, the RV wouldn't protect us much longer. "We'll need supplies," Derek said. Water, at least, a weapon. I grabbed my hiking backpack and stuffed in bottles of water, energy bars, a first aid kit. Derek found a camping hatchet we'd brought for splitting firewood. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. He also grabbed a flashlight even though it was full daylight. Smart. If we were going to be walking through the forest, we might need it. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, even though I would never be ready for this. Derek opened the emergency window on the western side, a small opening near the back of the RV. He went first, squeezing his shoulders through the gap and dropping down outside. I heard him grunt as he hit the ground, then his voice. "Okay, come on." I handed the backpack through, then the hatchet, then pulled myself through the window. The frame scraped against my ribs and I felt a moment of pure panic as I imagined getting stuck there, trapped half in and half out while the trees closed in. But then I was through, falling, and Derek caught me. We were standing in the narrow space between the RV and the trees. Up close, I could see the pine bark was moving, slow undulations like breathing flesh. The root people were turning, alerted to our escape. "Go," Derek said, pushing me toward the gap between the trees. I ran. The gap was so narrow that I had to turn sideways to fit through, the bark scraping against my front and back. The sensation made my skin crawl. It was warm, almost body temperature, and it pulsed under my touch. Behind me, I heard Derek forcing his way through. Then we were past the tree line, stumbling into the forest proper. The trees here weren't as close together, but they still felt wrong. Too still, too attentive. I could feel them watching us if trees could watch. "Which way?" I gasped. Derek pointed. "West." The road was west of where we parked. We ran through the pine forest, our feet crunching on fallen needles, our breaths loud in the unnatural quiet. I kept expecting the root people to appear, but we seemed to be alone. Just us and the trees and the ground that trembled with each footfall. After what felt like forever but was probably only 10 minutes, I had to stop. My lungs burned and my legs felt like rubber. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. "We can't stop," Derek said, but he was winded too. Just a minute. That's when I heard it. A sound like wind through leaves, but we were in a pine forest and the sound was wrong. Too rhythmic, too much like words. I looked up and saw them in the trees above us. The root people clinging to branches, their hollow faces turned down toward us. "Derek," I whispered. He looked up and his face went white. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, perched in the canopy like twisted birds. We ran again, any thought of rest forgotten. The root people dropped from the trees, landing with soft thuds on the forest floor. They moved faster now, their stuttering gaits becoming more fluid as they pursued us. I could hear them behind us, their wooden joints creaking, the rustle of their pine needle skin. The forest seemed to be fighting us. Roots reached up from the ground, trying to snag our feet. Branches hung lower than they should, forcing us to duck and weave. The trees themselves groaned and shifted, making it harder to keep our bearing. Derek was ahead of me, the hatchet in one hand. A root person emerged from behind a tree directly in his path. Without hesitation, Derek swung the hatchet. The blade bit into the thing's shoulder, and instead of blood, a stream of soil poured out. The root person didn't even slow down. It grabbed Derek's wrist, and where it touched, his skin began to gray, the color and texture changing, becoming bark-like. I screamed and grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it at the thing's head. The branch connected with a hollow thud, and the root person's head twisted around backward with a crack. It released Derek, who stumbled back, staring at his wrist in horror. The gray bark texture was spreading. "Run!" I shouted, pulling him along. We burst through a line of trees, and suddenly we were on the forest road. 2 dirt ruts separated by a crown of weeds, but unmistakably man-made. Derek looked at his wrist. The gray had stopped spreading just past his hand, the dividing line between normal skin and transformed tissue sharp and clear. "Oh, God," he whispered. "What's happening to me?" I didn't have an answer. The root people had stopped at the tree line, as if something about the road held them back. But they stood there, dozens of them now, waiting. "We need to keep moving," I said. "Maybe at the highway, Derek interrupted me with a cry of pain. He fell to his knees, clutching his transformed hand. As I watched in horror, his fingers began to split and elongate, becoming more root-like. The transformation was accelerating. "Leave me," he gasped. "You have to run. I'm not leaving you. Mia, please." His voice broke off in a scream as his other arm began to change. The bark texture was spreading up his neck now, toward his face. I knelt beside him, tears streaming down my face, my hands hovering helplessly over his changing body. "What do I do? Tell me what to do." His eyes met mine, still human, still Derek, and I saw the terror and resignation in them. "Run," he whispered. Then his jaw began to crack and reform, and he couldn't speak anymore. I stood on shaking legs and backed away, watching as the transformation completed itself. Derek's body twisted and elongated, his clothes tearing away as he became one of them. Within minutes, there was nothing human left. Just another root person, standing among the others at the tree line. The thing that had been Derek turned its hollow face toward me. Its head tilted, almost curious. Then it raised one hand, the hand I had held so many times, and pointed down the road. West, toward safety. I understood then. Some part of Derek was still in there, at least for the moment, and he was telling me to run. So I did. I ran down that dirt road until my lungs felt like they would burst, until my legs screamed in agony, until the sun was high overhead and I had to stop or collapse. When I finally looked back, the tree line was far behind me, invisible around a curve in the road. I was alone. I walked the rest of the way to the highway, maybe 15 miles. My water ran out. My feet blistered. The sun beat down mercilessly. But I kept walking, because stopping felt like giving up, like letting the forest win. When I finally stumbled onto State Highway 119, a logging truck stopped for me. The driver took one look at my torn clothes, my bleeding feet, my tear-streaked face, and called the police. I tried to tell them. I really did. But how do you explain walking trees and root people in ground that breathes? They searched the forest. They found Derek's truck, rusted almost beyond recognition, and the RV collapsed inward like a crushed tin can. They found no trace of Derek himself. The official report called it a flash flood. Unusual for the season, but possible. They said Derek must have been swept away, his body carried off by the water. They said the rust on the truck and the damage to the RV were consistent with flood damage. They said my trauma had caused me to create a false narrative to cope with the loss. They're wrong. I know what I saw. I know what happened to Derek. I'm writing this from a hotel room in Natchitoches, 3 days after I walked out of that forest. I can't leave yet. The police want me to stay for more interviews, more questions I can't truthfully answer. Through the window, I can see the pine forests in the distance, dark green against the sky. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I feel it, that familiar tremor, that vibration traveling up through the building's foundations, the ground, breathing, and I wonder how far the forest reaches. I wonder if those trees are moving, slowly, inexorably, spreading their circle wider. I wonder if the roads will hold them back, or if they'll learn to cross, the way Derek did. And I wonder about Derek himself, the thing he became. Is he still in there somewhere, trapped in a body of roots and moss? Does he remember me? Does he remember being human? My hand shakes as I write this. Not from fear, though there's plenty of that. It shakes because this morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. A small patch on my shoulder, rough and brown. I told myself it was a bruise from squeezing through the trees. But bruises don't have the texture of bark. It's spreading. Not fast, just a little more each day. By tomorrow, it will be the size of a quarter. By next week, maybe the size of my palm. And eventually... I called Derek's phone today. I don't know why. It went straight to voicemail like it has every time I've tried. But this time, just before the beep, I heard something, a rustling, like wind through pine needles, like breathing. The hotel room has a balcony that overlooks the parking lot and, beyond it, the forest. I stand there sometimes, watching the tree line. waiting. I know they're coming. I can feel them in the trembling ground, in the bark spreading across my skin, in the way the wind seems to whisper my name. The forest is patient. It doesn't need to hurry. It has already claimed me. It's just waiting for me to come home. I should run. I should get in a car and drive as far away as I can, to the desert maybe, somewhere without trees. But I don't think it would matter. The forest is in me now, changing me from the inside out. And besides, part of me doesn't want to run anymore. Part of me wants to walk back into those pines, to find the thing that used to be Derek, to stand beside him as the transformation completes. At least then we'd be together. The ground trembles, the trees wait, and I stand here on this balcony, watching the bark spread up my arm, feeling the earth's breath matching my own, knowing that soon I won't be Mia anymore. I'll be something else, something that belongs to the forest. The trees are calling. It won't be long now. Story 3. My name is David. I'm 34 years old, and I came to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota, thinking the isolation would help me write. I'd been struggling with my novel for 8 months, missing every deadline my agent had set, and my wife Carolyn suggested we take our 26-foot Winnebago up to the edge of the wilderness for 2 weeks. No internet, no distractions, she'd said. Just you, me, and the quiet you keep saying you need. The quiet. Jesus Christ. The quiet. We pulled into the primitive campsite off Echo Trail on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. The site wasn't much: a gravel pad barely large enough for the RV, a fire ring constructed from blackened stones, and a weathered picnic table that listed to one side. The nearest other campers were at least 3 miles away, tucked somewhere along the serpentine road that wound through dense stands of white pine and paper birch. The woman at the ranger station had seemed surprised we wanted such an isolated spot this late in the season. "Most folks clear out by mid-September," she'd said, her eyes lingering on Carolyn's belly. My wife was 5 months pregnant, just starting to show. Weather turns fast up here, and the quiet gets to some people. I'd laughed at that. The quiet was exactly what I'd come for. Carolyn stood outside the RV, one hand pressed to the small of her back, surveying the campsite with an expression I couldn't quite read. She'd been quieter than usual during the 5-hour drive from Minneapolis, staring out the window at the endless forests, occasionally touching her stomach with that protective gesture pregnant women make. "It's perfect," I said, killing the engine. The sudden silence was startling. No traffic sounds, no neighbors, no ambient city noise. Just the whisper of wind through pine needles and the occasional cry of a bird I couldn't identify. "It's isolated," Carolyn corrected. She wasn't wrong. We spent the first day settling in. I set up my laptop at the dinette table, arranging my notes and research materials with the careful precision of a man preparing for battle. Carolyn organized the galley kitchen, unpacked our clothes, and made the bed in the rear compartment. She moved through the small space with practiced efficiency, but I noticed she kept glancing out the windows, her gaze drawn to the tree line that pressed close on 3 sides. That night, we built a fire and sat outside wrapped in blankets. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset, our breath fogging in the beam of the Coleman lantern. Stars blazed overhead in profusion, undiminished by light pollution. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of diamonds. "It's beautiful," Carolyn said softly. "Scary. Beautiful." I understood what she meant. There was something overwhelming about so much darkness, so much empty space. The forest around us was an impenetrable black wall, and I found myself unconsciously moving closer to the fire's light. Around midnight, as we were preparing for bed, I heard something that made me pause. I was brushing my teeth at the small bathroom sink when it came. A sound from outside, distant but clear in the profound silence. "Hello?" It was my voice, my exact voice. The same timbre, the same slight rasp, the cadence identical. But I hadn't spoken. I spit into the sink, my heart suddenly hammering. "Did you hear that?" Carolyn looked up from the bed where she'd been reading. "Hear what?" "Someone called out. They said—" I stopped. It sounded insane. Nothing. Just the wind, probably. But it hadn't been the wind. I knew my own voice. I lay awake for hours that night, listening. The RV creaked and settled in the cold, every small sound magnified by the silence. Carolyn slept fitfully beside me, occasionally murmuring in her sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it again. "Hello?" My voice coming from somewhere in the forest, closer than before. I slipped out of bed and moved to the window above the dinette, pressing my face to the cold glass. The Coleman lantern had burned out, and the darkness outside was absolute. I couldn't see beyond my own reflection. A pale, frightened face staring back at me. Then my reflection smiled. I jerked back, pulse racing. But when I looked again, my reflection was normal. Just my own face, wide-eyed and scared. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Morning brought relief in the form of watery sunlight filtering through the trees. I made coffee while Carolyn showered, trying to convince myself that exhaustion and imagination had conspired to play tricks on me. The forest looked different in daylight. Beautiful and benign, the trees dressed in the gold and crimson of autumn. "You look terrible," Carolyn said when she emerged, toweling her hair. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much." I handed her a mug. "Bad dreams." She studied me over the rim of her coffee. "We can leave if you want. This was supposed to help you relax, not give you nightmares." "No, I'm fine. Just need to adjust." I gestured at my laptop. "I'm going to try to write, get some words down, but I couldn't write." I sat at the dinette for 3 hours, staring at the blank page, my fingers motionless on the keyboard. Every few minutes I'd catch myself listening, waiting for something. The silence pressed against my ears like water pressure. Around noon, Carolyn suggested a walk. "You're going stir-crazy already. Let's explore a bit. There's supposed to be a hiking trail about a quarter mile up the road." We followed the narrow dirt track through the forest, fallen leaves crunching under our boots. The trail wound between massive pines, their trunks thick as columns. Carolyn walked ahead, occasionally stopping to photograph mushrooms or interesting bark patterns with her phone. The pregnancy had slowed her down some, but she still moved with the easy grace that had first attracted me to her 7 years ago. "Wait," I said, stopping abruptly. "Say something." She turned, puzzled. "What?" "Just say anything. Count to 10. "David, what?" "Please." She humored me, counting slowly to 10. Her voice was clear and immediate, exactly as it should be. No echo, no distortion. "Now you," she said. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The numbers came back to me. Not an echo exactly. That would have been natural in this terrain, sound bouncing off the trees. This was different. My voice repeated the numbers, but out of order. Wrong. 7, 9, 2, 10, 1, 5, 4, 8, 3, 6. Carolyn hadn't seemed to notice anything odd. "Feel better?" she asked. I nodded mutely, not trusting my voice. We continued walking. The trail led to a small clearing where someone had built a cairn from smooth river stones. It stood about 3 feet tall, carefully balanced. Carolyn circled it, curious. Wonder how old this is. I approached the cairn, that familiar unease prickling along my spine. The stones were wet, though it hadn't rained in days. When I touched the topmost rock, my fingers came away damp. I sniffed them. Copper. Blood. "Don't touch it," I said sharply. Carolyn's hand jerked back. "Why? What's wrong?" I couldn't explain. I wiped my fingers on my jeans, trying to rub away the slickness. "Let's head back." We didn't speak on the return walk. My mind was racing, trying to find rational explanations. Old blood from an animal kill. Rain trapped between stones. Rust from mineral deposits. But none of it felt right. Nothing felt right. That afternoon, I forced myself to write. The words came grudgingly, each sentence feeling false and forced. I was writing a thriller about a detective hunting a serial killer, but the fictional horrors seemed pathetically tame compared to the creeping dread I felt in this forest. Around 4, Carolyn called from outside. "David, come look at this." I found her standing 20 feet from the RV, staring at the ground. She'd discovered something in the pine needles. A circle of small stones, each one placed exactly 12 inches from its neighbor. In the center of the circle was a child's toy, a plastic action figure, sun-bleached and weathered. "That's weird." "Right," Carolyn said. "Who would leave that here?" I crouched down, not touching anything. The action figure was positioned face down, its arms bent at unnatural angles. Something about its placement felt deliberate, ritualistic. "Could be from the previous campers," I suggested. "Kids playing." "The ranger said no one's been here in weeks." I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "Let's go inside. It's getting cold." But Carolyn had noticed something else. "There are more." She was right. Now that I was looking, I could see other circles scattered through the campsite, each one containing a different object. A rotting sneaker, a tarnished bracelet, a water-damaged paperback book, all arranged with the same careful precision. "We should leave," Carolyn said quietly. "This place feels wrong. In the morning," I promised. "We'll pack up at first light." We retreated into the RV as dusk gathered. I locked both doors and checked the windows twice, making sure they were latched. Carolyn made soup for dinner, but neither of us had much appetite. We ate in silence, the small overhead light creating an island of warmth in the encroaching darkness. At 8:30, something hit the side of the RV. The impact was solid, deliberate, not the random thunk of a falling branch. Carolyn dropped her spoon, soup splashing across the table. "What was that?" I grabbed the flashlight from its mount by the door. "Stay here." "David, no." But I was already unlocking the door, stepping out into the cold night. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and shadows. I walked slowly around the RV, playing the light across every surface. Nothing. No damage, no signs of impact. The metal siding was unmarked. "David!" My voice again, coming from the forest. But my mouth was closed. The voice called again, pleading this time. "David! Where are you?" It was so perfectly me. The concern, the slight tremor of fear, that for a disorienting second I wondered if I'd somehow split in two, if part of me was lost out there in the dark. "It's happening again," I whispered. "David, help me." The voice was moving, circling the campsite. I spun, trying to track it, but the darkness was too complete beyond the flashlight's narrow beam. Then Carolyn screamed. I ran back to the RV. She was standing at the window, both hands pressed to the glass, her face white with terror. "There's someone out there. I saw them. Right where you were standing." "There's no one." "I saw them. They looked exactly like you, but wrong. Their eyes—" She choked on the words. "Get inside. Please." I locked the door behind us. Carolyn was shaking and I pulled her close, feeling the rapid flutter of her heart. Or maybe it was mine. Or the baby's. "What's happening?" she whispered against my chest. "I don't know." The night grew worse. At 9:15 we heard footsteps on the roof. Slow, measured steps, heel-toe, walking the length of the RV and back again. The aluminum roof popped and flexed under the weight. I stood frozen in the center of the living area, flashlight aimed uselessly at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped directly above us. Then came a sound like fingernails scraping metal, long and deliberate, raising goosebumps across my entire body. "We need to drive out of here," Carolyn said. "Right now." I grabbed the keys from the counter. "Get in the passenger seat." We buckled ourselves in, and I turned the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I tried again. Nothing but a clicking sound. The battery was dead. No. I pumped the gas pedal, turned the key again and again. Nothing. "David?" My voice from right outside the driver's window. I turned my head slowly. A face stared back at me through the glass. My face. But Carolyn had been right. It was wrong. The proportions were slightly off, the eyes too large, the mouth stretched wider than humanly possible. It smiled at me, showing too many teeth. "David?" it said again, its lips moving out of sync with the words. I closed my eyes and turned away. "Don't look at it. There's one on my side, too," Carolyn said, her voice high and thin. I risked a glance. She was right. Another version of me pressed against the passenger window, its breath fogging the glass. As I watched, it raised one hand and tapped on the window with a single finger. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the RV. Then the one on my side started tapping too, and suddenly there were more of them, tapping on every window, the sound multiplying until it became a horrible rhythm, a percussion of fingernails on glass all around us. "Make them stop!" Carolyn screamed, covering her ears. I lunged for the light switches, plunging us into darkness. Maybe if they couldn't see us, they'd leave. But the tapping continued, and now I could hear them speaking, all of them using my voice, overlapping and discordant. "David, David, David, David. Help me, help me, help me. Let me in, let me in, let me in." Carolyn was sobbing. I pulled her into my arms and we huddled together in the darkness, surrounded by those voices. My voices, all of them wrong. I don't know how long it lasted. Time became elastic, stretching like taffy. The tapping and voices merged into a kind of white noise, simultaneously unbearable and numbing. At some point, I realized Carolyn had gone limp against me, either unconscious or asleep from sheer exhaustion. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The silence was so sudden it felt like a physical blow. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. No tapping, no voices, no footsteps. Just the normal settling sounds of the RV and Carolyn's soft breathing. I waited 10 minutes before daring to move. My legs had gone numb and I had to ease Carolyn down carefully before standing. Every muscle in my body ached. Moving like a man underwater, I crept to the window and peered out. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The forest looked serene, beautiful. There was no sign that anything unusual had happened. I checked every window. Nothing. Just morning light and trees and the last wisps of ground fog burning off in the sun. Was it real? Carolyn's voice startled me. She was sitting up, looking small and lost in the dawn light. Please tell me we both had the same nightmare. I wanted to lie to her, but I couldn't. It was real. Then we're leaving. I don't care if we have to walk. I tried the ignition again, not expecting anything. The engine roared to life on the first try. We didn't bother unhooking the utilities or collapsing the jacks. I just put the RV in gear and started driving, the stabilizing jacks scraping against the gravel until I picked up speed. Neither of us looked back. The drive out should have taken 20 minutes. We'd come in on Echo Trail, a straightforward route with only a few turns. But after 30 minutes of driving, I still hadn't reached the main road. The forest pressed close on both sides, and the dirt track seemed to wind endlessly through the trees. "This doesn't look right," Carolyn said. She had the crumpled map on her lap. "We should have hit County Road 116 15 minutes ago." I kept driving, fighting growing panic. The RV's GPS showed our position, but the map display was corrupted, the screen flickering with static and impossible geometries. According to the device, we were driving in circles, even though the road ahead appeared straight. "There," Carolyn pointed. A ranger station appeared around the next bend, the same one where we'd checked in. The same woman stood outside watering a planter box full of dead flowers. I pulled up, put the RV in park. The ranger looked up as I climbed out, and I saw recognition in her eyes. But not surprise. Never surprise. "Heading out?" she asked pleasantly. "What's happening here?" I demanded. "What the hell is this place?" She set down the watering can. "You've been here 3 days. That's usually when people start noticing. 3 days? We just got here yesterday." "3 days," she repeated, her voice hardening, same as all the others. The quiet gets to some people, like I said, gets inside them, makes echoes. "Echoes," I repeated numbly. Behind me, I heard Carolyn get out of the RV. "The land remembers things," the ranger continued. "Voices, mostly, sometimes shapes. It takes them in and sends them back out, but they come back wrong. Broken, like..." She paused, searching for words. "Like recordings played backward." "You knew," Carolyn said. "You knew, and you let us go in there anyway." The ranger's expression didn't change. "I warned you. Most folks clear out by mid-September, but you wanted the quiet." I looked back at the road we'd come from. In the morning light, I could see something I'd missed before. Cairns of stones lined both sides of the trail, hundreds of them, stretching back into the forest. And in the center of each cairn sat an object. A shoe, a wallet, a photograph, a phone. What are those? Things people left behind, or things that left them? Hard to say which. The ranger picked up her watering can again. You should go now, while there's still enough of you to go. What does that mean? I grabbed her arm. What does that fucking mean? She pulled away from me, and for just a second her face rippled like water, showing something underneath. Something that wore her shape like a poorly fitted mask. Go, she said, and this time her voice echoed, harmonizing with itself. Before the forest keeps you too. I ran back to the RV. Carolyn was already climbing in, and I gunned the engine before my door was fully closed. The ranger watched us go, still watering those dead flowers. This time, the road seemed to unfold correctly. The forest thinned, and within minutes we reached the county road. I turned south, toward civilization, toward people and noise and safety. We made it, Carolyn said. She was crying, tears streaming down her face. Jesus Christ, we made it! I wanted to agree. I wanted to believe we'd escaped. But something was wrong. I could feel it like a splinter under my skin, small and persistent. Carolyn, I said carefully, what day is it? She checked her phone. The screen glowed, service bars showing full. Thursday, September 28th. Why? We left on Tuesday. No, She stopped, her face going pale. The ranger said 3 days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 3 days. But it had only felt like one night. One impossibly long night. We drove in silence for another hour. Traffic increased as we approached the interstate. Other cars, other people, everything blessedly normal. I felt the tension slowly bleeding out of my shoulders. Then Carolyn said, "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Someone just said your name." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. No, I didn't hear anything. "David." The voice was faint, coming from the back of the RV, from the bedroom. My voice, questioning and lost. "David, where are you?" "Drive faster," Carolyn whispered. "Please drive faster." I pushed the accelerator down, the RV's engine straining. 60 miles per hour, 65. The voice in the back kept calling. Sometimes my voice, sometimes Carolyn's, sometimes a child's voice that made my wife sob with her hands over her ears. We didn't stop until we reached Minneapolis. I pulled into a crowded mall parking lot, surrounded by cars and people and the blessed mundane chaos of suburban life. We sat there for a long time, not speaking, just breathing. "It's over," I finally said. "We're home. We're safe." Carolyn turned to look at me. Her eyes were red from crying, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Are we?" I started to answer, but then I heard it. From somewhere outside the RV, distant but clear, cutting through the ambient noise of the parking lot. "David?" My voice, calling, searching. Carolyn heard it too. I could see it in her face, the dawning horror. "It followed us? No, that's impossible. It's just..." But I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make myself lie. Because there it was again. Closer now. "David? Where are you?" And then another voice, this time from inside the RV, from the bedroom. "Hello?" Carolyn's voice. But Carolyn's mouth was closed. We looked at each other, and I saw my own terror reflected in her eyes. The ranger's words came back to me. Before the forest keeps you too. But we'd left. We'd escaped. We were miles away from that cursed place. Except something had come with us. Something wearing our voices like stolen clothes, echoing us, calling to us, getting closer with each repetition. "David? Carolyn? Hello?" The voices overlapped, multiplying. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw movement in the bedroom doorway. A shadow that was almost my shape, but not quite. It moved like I moved, breathed like I breathed. It smiled like I smiled. Then it stepped forward into the light, and I saw its eyes. They were wrong, all wrong, black and reflective like still water at midnight. When it opened its mouth to speak, I saw that it had no tongue, just a darkness that went down and down and down. "Hello," it said with my voice. Carolyn screamed. I threw open the door and ran, dragging her with me. We stumbled through the parking lot past staring shoppers who must have thought we were drunk or crazy. Behind us, the RV door stood open, and I could see more shapes moving inside, moving toward the light. We ran until we reached a crowd, the safety of numbers. But even there, surrounded by people, I could still hear it. Calling, searching. David. It was coming from a teenager walking past, his mouth moving but his voice all wrong, harmonizing with itself. David, where are you? An old woman, unaware she was speaking with my voice. Hello? A child, skipping past with his mother. The words coming from his mouth in my exact tone and timbre. They were all echoing me now, all of them. The forest had taken my voice and scattered it like seeds, and now it was growing, spreading, finding me wherever I went. Carolyn's hand tightened on mine. David, she whispered. Really her, really my wife. I can hear them too. They're using my voice now. They're using both our voices. She was right, I could hear it now, weaving through the crowd. Our voices calling to each other, searching, never quite connecting. An eternal game of Marco Polo played by things that wore our sound but had no souls. We stand in this parking lot now, surrounded by crowds, and I can still hear us. Everywhere. In every conversation, every phone call, every passing voice. The echoes multiply, spreading from person to person like a virus of sound. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really here at all anymore. If the real David is still back there in that RV, locked in an endless night, while this version of me wanders the world, calling and calling, never finding what I'm looking for. Carolyn is pregnant. In 4 months, our child will be born, and I wonder what voice it will have, what echoes it will carry inside it, what it will call us in the dark. I hear myself everywhere now, in restaurants, in stores, on the street, and each time I hear it getting closer to something, some final echo, some ultimate reverberation. Sometimes, late at night, I go back to that blank page on my laptop, the novel I was supposed to write, and I find words there I don't remember typing. They're in my voice, my style, but they tell a story I don't remember living. They tell the story of a man who went into the forest looking for quiet and found himself instead, found too many of himself. And each version is calling to the others, trying to find which one is real. I think I know now. I think I've always known. None of us are real anymore. We're all just echoes of echoes, voices bouncing off voices, getting more distorted with each repetition until there's nothing left but sound and static and the memory of who we used to be. David. Yes, I'm here. David? Yes, I'm here too. David? And here. Hello? We're all here, every version of me, every echo. All of us calling across the distance, trying to reconnect the scattered pieces of whoever I used to be. Carolyn squeezes my hand. Real or echo, I can't tell anymore. Does it matter? We're both here, both lost, both listening to the sounds of ourselves scattered across the world like broken glass. The baby moves inside her. Its first echo, its first voice. Hello. It will say someday, in my voice or hers or something entirely new, and will answer. All of us, every scattered version. Hello, hello, hello. Forever and ever and ever. The forest keeps what it takes. And it took us 3 days ago, or yesterday, or years from now. Time echoes too, after all. Everything echoes here. Everything. I still hear myself calling from that distant forest, from that impossible night. And I know I always will, because we never really left at all. We're still there. We'll always be there. Calling, searching, echoing in the dark. Story 4. My name is Ella. I'm 34. The wind at Kisatchie National Forest in central Louisiana carried someone calling my childhood nickname, Ellie Bird, a name only my grandmother used before she died when I was 7. I should have turned the RV around right then. But Marcus was already setting up the awning, his weathered hands working the crank with practiced efficiency. And Jen was inside unpacking our supplies with that methodical precision she brought to everything. We'd driven 6 hours from Houston for this trip, our annual escape from the suffocating routine of our marketing jobs, and I wasn't about to ruin it because the wind through the longleaf pines sounded like a dead woman's voice. "You good?" Marcus called out, squinting at me through the late afternoon sun. He was my oldest friend, the kind of person who'd known me long enough to read discomfort in my posture. We'd met in college, bonded over terrible horror movies and cheaper whiskey, and somehow maintained that friendship through job changes, relationships, and the general entropy of adult life. Yeah, just the drive. I forced a smile and grabbed a folding chair from the storage compartment. Jen emerged from the RV, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, already changed into hiking clothes. She was Marcus's girlfriend of 2 years, a trauma nurse with an unshakable calm that I both admired and occasionally found unnerving. Nothing seemed to rattle her. "Camp's looking good. Should we do the trail before we lose light? I want to check out Longleaf Vista before dinner." The Kisatchie had been Marcus's choice. He'd read about the sandstone formations, the clear creeks cutting through the forest, the relative emptiness compared to more popular parks. "Authentic wilderness," he'd said. "The real Louisiana backcountry, not the swamp tour bullshit." We'd found a primitive camping area off Forest Road 321, a clearing maybe 50 yards across, surrounded by towering pines and thick undergrowth of yaupon and wax myrtle. The nearest established campground was 3 miles south. We had the forest to ourselves, or so it seemed. The trail to Longleaf Vista was supposed to be an easy 2-mile loop. We set off just after 5. The September heat finally breaking into something tolerable. Spanish moss hung from the oaks at the forest edge, swaying in that same wind that had whispered my name. I kept waiting for it to happen again, kept listening for that particular inflection, Ellie Bird, but heard only the normal sounds of wind through leaves. "You're quiet," Jen observed, falling into step beside me while Marcus charged ahead, consulting his phone's GPS. "Tired, I guess. You seemed spooked when we pulled in." I glanced at her. Jen's perceptiveness could be inconvenient. The wind sounded weird. Made me think of my grandmother, the one who raised you. For a few years, after my parents' accident, I didn't like talking about it. The car crash when I was 4, the years with Grandma Shirley in her old house in Shreveport, the smell of her lavender sachets, and the way she'd call me Ellie Bird because I was always flitting about. Then her stroke, and the shuffle to foster care that had defined the rest of my childhood. "That must have been hard," Jen said quietly. "It was a long time ago." We walked in silence for a while, following the trail as it wound between the pines. The forest here was different from the swamps most people associated with Louisiana. Drier, more open, with rust-colored soil and sandstone outcroppings that jutted through the earth like broken teeth. Beautiful in an austere way, but there was something else too. A quality of watchfulness I couldn't quite name. Marcus waited for us at a fork in the trail. "GPS is acting weird. Says we're off the path, but we're clearly on it." I pulled out my own phone. No signal, which was expected, but the GPS did show our position as about 50 feet north of where we were actually standing. The blue dot pulsed in a thicket of brush. "Probably the canyon," Jen suggested, pointing at the sandstone formation rising to our left. "Interference." "Yeah, probably." Marcus pocketed his phone. "Vista should be just ahead." But it wasn't. We walked another 20 minutes, the trail growing narrower and less defined until Marcus finally stopped. "This doesn't match the map. We should have hit the overlook by now." The sun was dropping fast, filtering orange through the canopy. Shadows pooled in the low places. I felt a creeping unease, the kind that starts in your gut and spreads outward. "We should head back," I said. "We can try again tomorrow." "Yeah." Marcus turned around, studying the path behind us. Was there a trail marker back there? I don't remember seeing one. There hadn't been. I was certain we'd passed several wooden posts with colored blazes on our way in, but now, looking back the way we'd come, I saw only an unbroken wall of trees. "It's fine," Jen said, her nurse's calm kicking in. "We just retrace our steps. Can't be more than 2 miles." But somehow it was. We walked for what felt like an hour, the forest growing darker around us, and didn't reach the RV. The trail seemed to stretch and bend, presenting forks and splits that shouldn't have existed. Marcus's jaw grew tight with frustration. Jen's calm started to crack at the edges, and I heard it again. Faint, distant, carried on wind that smelled faintly of lavender. Ellie bird. I stopped walking. Did you hear that? Hear what? Marcus was examining his phone again, cursing softly at the frozen GPS. Someone said my name. Jen touched my arm. Ella, there's no one out here. I know what I heard, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. The wind through the pines could make any sound. Creaking branches, rustling leaves, the whisper of air through stone crevices. And I was tired, stressed from work, maybe projecting my anxiety onto random noise. Let's just keep moving, Marcus said, before we lose all the light. We found the RV at dusk, emerging from the tree line into our clearing with a shared sense of relief that felt disproportionate to having been lost for an hour. The white curve of our rented camper looked almost surreal against the darkening forest, a bubble of normalcy in a place that suddenly felt anything but. What a clusterfuck, Marcus muttered, heading straight for the cooler. He pulled out 3 beers, handed them around. Tomorrow we're sticking to the main roads. Clearly marked trails only. Jen started setting up for dinner, arranging a portable grill while I tried to shake the lingering dread from the hike. The forest around us was alive with sound. Crickets, night birds, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. Normal sounds. Nothing to justify the tightness in my chest. You know what's weird, Jen said, poking at the charcoal. I swear we passed the same rock formation 3 times. That sandstone outcrop with the split down the middle. Marcus frowned. The trail probably just loops around. Maybe, but she didn't sound convinced. We ate grilled sausages and potato salad from a container, washing it down with beer and forced conversation about work and mutual friends. The fire snapped and popped, throwing dancing shadows against the RV's metal side. Beyond our small circle of light, the forest was a solid wall of darkness. I was helping clean up, scraping paper plates into a trash bag when I saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of the clearing. Just for a second, a pale shape between the trees. There, and gone. Did you see that? Marcus followed my gaze. See what? Something moved, over there. I pointed, but the shadows revealed nothing. Probably a deer, he said, or a raccoon. It was bigger than a raccoon. Well, it's gone now. He yawned, stretching. I'm beat. You guys ready to call it? We secured the food in the RV's storage compartments, bear protocols, though black bears were supposedly rare in Kasachi, and got ready for bed. The RV had a small bedroom in back for Marcus and Jen, and a fold-out couch in the main cabin for me. I changed into sleep clothes, brushed my teeth at the tiny sink, and tried to settle my nerves. The wind picked up around midnight. It howled through the pines with a sound like distant voices, rising and falling in almost rhythmic patterns. I lay on the couch, staring at the curved ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was listening to us, that the forest itself was aware of our presence and resented it. Around 2 a.m. I heard the tapping, soft at first, barely audible over the wind. Tap, tap, tap against the RV's exterior near the door. I sat up, pulse quickening. The tapping continued, irregular but persistent, like someone drumming their fingers against the metal. I crept to the window, moving slowly to avoid making noise, and peered through the curtain. Nothing. Just darkness and the vague shapes of trees swaying in the wind. The tapping stopped. I stood there for a long moment, holding my breath, then retreated to the couch. Probably a branch, I told myself, a piece of debris caught in the wind. But I didn't believe it, and I didn't sleep. The morning revealed itself through a thick ground fog that turned the clearing into something dreamlike and unreal. I emerged from the RV feeling gritty and exhausted, my unease from the night compounded by lack of sleep. Marcus was already up, examining something on the ground near the door. "Morning," I said, my voice rough. "What are you looking at?" He glanced up, his expression troubled. "Footprints, all around the RV?" I walked over, the wet grass soaking through my sneakers. He was right. The soft earth around our campsite was covered in prints. Bare feet by the look of them. circling the RV in a complete loop. They were small, child-sized, with clearly defined toes. Kids? I suggested, though I knew how weak it sounded. Out here? At night? Marcus stood, brushing dirt from his hands. And look, they start and end at the same point, like someone just walked in a circle around us while we slept. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. We should leave. What? Because of some footprints? Because this place is wrong. I heard the edge in my voice, saw Marcus's concern deepen. The GPS glitches, getting lost on a simple trail. The sounds last night. What sounds? The tapping. On the side of the RV. You didn't hear it. He shook his head. I was dead asleep. Jen emerged, already dressed and looking somehow put together despite the circumstances. She examined the footprints without comment, then looked at me. You want to pack up? I think we should. Let's at least have breakfast first, Marcus said. Make a rational decision. We drove 6 hours to get here. Maybe we just had a weird first night. I wanted to argue, to insist we leave immediately, but I also knew how I'd sound, paranoid, overreacting to noises in the dark and some unexplained footprints. So I nodded and helped Marcus start the camp stove for coffee and eggs. The fog burned off by 9, revealing a bright September morning that seemed to mock my fears. Birds sang in the canopy. Sunlight filtered green through the leaves. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely at odds with the dread sitting heavy in my stomach. Okay, Marcus said, sipping his coffee. Let's talk this through. What exactly are we worried about? I heard someone say my name yesterday, I said. My childhood nickname that nobody uses. The wind, Jen suggested gently. I know how wind sounds. This was different. And then last night, the tapping. Could have been a branch. And the footprints. Marcus set down his mug. I don't have an explanation for those, but nothing actually happened to us. No one tried to get in. We're fine. So far, I said. Look, he ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his tone. If you really want to leave, we'll leave. But can we at least give it one more day? Maybe take a different trail, stay close to camp. If anything else weird happens, we pack up immediately. Deal? I looked at Jen, who shrugged. I'm okay either way. But Marcus is right. Nothing has actually threatened us. I wanted to trust their rationality, to believe my fear was unfounded. And there was a part of me, some stubborn core of pride, that refused to be run off by shadows and strange sounds. Fine, one more day. But we stick together, and if anything feels off, we leave. No discussion. Fair enough, Marcus agreed. We spent the morning around camp, doing small chores and trying to maintain normalcy. I read a book, though I kept losing my place, reading the same paragraphs over and over while my attention drifted to the tree line. The forest felt different in daylight, less overtly menacing but somehow more watchful, like it was waiting for something. Around noon, Jen suggested a short hike to a creek marked on the map, less than a mile from camp. Just to stretch our legs, we'll stay on the main trail. The path to Wild Azalea Creek was wider and better maintained than yesterday's trail, marked with consistent white blazes on the trees. We walked in silence, each of us processing the morning's weirdness in our own way. The forest here was dense with undergrowth, creating walls of green on either side of the trail. We'd gone maybe half a mile when I noticed the smell. Faint at first, then growing stronger. A sweet, rotten odor that reminded me of garbage left too long in summer heat. You guys smell that? I asked. Marcus wrinkled his nose. Dead animal, probably. Deer or something. But as we continued, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Flies buzzed in thick clouds, and then we saw it. Off the trail about 20 feet. A mound of something pale and partially concealed by brush. Is that... Jen started forward, her nurse's instinct overriding caution. Don't, I said, grabbing her arm, but she'd already gotten close enough to see. She stopped, her body going rigid. That's a person. Marcus and I hurried over. The smell was overwhelming, making my eyes water. The body, because that's what it clearly was, lay face down in the leaf litter, wearing what looked like old, tattered clothing. The exposed skin was waxy and pale, marked with signs of advanced decomposition. "We need to call someone," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "Fuck. Still no signal." Jen crouched beside the body, her professional detachment kicking in. Dead at least a week, maybe more. Hard to tell in this heat. She stood, wiping her hands on her jeans despite not having touched anything. "We need to get back to camp and drive until we have signal. Report this." "Wait." I was looking at the clothing, at something that had caught my eye. A patch on the shoulder, partially obscured by dirt. "Is that a park ranger uniform?" Jen looked closer, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think it is." We stood there for a moment, the implications settling over us. A dead ranger, out here in the woods, decomposing for at least a week. How had no one noticed? How had there been no search? "We're leaving," Marcus said firmly. "Right now. We'll report this from the road." No one argued. We hurried back along the trail, moving faster than caution probably warranted, driven by a collective need to get away from that awful smell and the questions it raised. But when we burst back into our clearing, we stopped short. The RV door was open. "I locked that," Marcus said. "I'm sure I locked it." We approached slowly, Marcus picking up a thick branch from the ground as an improvised weapon. He called out, "Anyone in there?" No response. The interior of the RV had been disturbed. Cabinets hung open, cushions were displaced, our belongings scattered across the floor. But nothing appeared to be missing. It was more like someone had searched the place looking for something specific. "What the fuck?" Jen breathed. Marcus moved through the RV systematically, checking the bedroom, the bathroom, confirming we were alone. "Whoever did this is gone. We're leaving," I said. "Right now. We throw everything in the car and get out of here." For once, no one disagreed. We worked quickly, shoving clothes and supplies into bags without bothering to organize them. Marcus got in the driver's seat and turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. The engine made a clicking sound but wouldn't turn over. "No, no, no," he muttered, turning the key repeatedly. Click, click, click. "Battery?" Jen suggested. "Can't be. It worked fine yesterday." He popped the hood and got out to look. I followed, dread building in my chest. The engine compartment looked wrong. Wires had been pulled loose, disconnected at random points. The battery terminals were corroded, covered in what looked like years of buildup despite the RV being nearly new. "Someone sabotaged it," Marcus said quietly. "Disabled it while we were gone." "Why?" Jen's voice was small, her nurse's calm finally breaking. "Why would someone do that?" "Because they don't want us to leave," I said. And even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were true. Because whatever's out here, whatever did this, it wants us here. We stood in a tight circle next to the useless RV, the forest seeming to press in around us. The sun was past its zenith now, afternoon shadows lengthening. I thought about the dead ranger, about the footprints circling our camp, about my grandmother's voice in the wind. "Okay," Marcus said, forcing authority into his voice. "We can't drive out, but we can walk. The main road is what, 3 miles? We can make that before dark if we leave now." "What about our stuff?" Jen asked. "Forget it. We take water, our phones, whatever cash we have. That's it. We walk out, find help, come back with rangers or police or whoever." It was a plan, at least. Better than staying here waiting for whatever came next. We grabbed what we needed. 3 water bottles, our wallets, my backpack with some snacks. Marcus found a flare gun in the RV's emergency kit and tucked it in his belt. As we were preparing to leave, Jen stopped, her hand on the doorframe. "Listen," she said. I heard it then. Children's laughter, high and bright, echoing through the forest. Multiple voices, playing some game in the trees. But we'd been here more than a day and seen no sign of other campers, no vehicles, no tents. And there was something off about the laughter, something that made my skin crawl. "Go," Marcus said. "Now." We headed for the tree line, aiming for where we remembered the access road cutting through the forest. But almost immediately, things felt wrong. The trees seemed denser than they should be, the gaps between them narrower. I pulled out my phone trying to navigate by GPS, but the blue dot showed us standing in the middle of a dense thicket, nowhere near the road. "It's wrong again," I said. "The GPS is wrong." "Then we go by the sun," Marcus pointed. "Road is roughly east. We keep the sun on our left and walk straight. But walking straight in a forest is harder than it sounds." We had to skirt around dense undergrowth, detour around fallen logs and sandstone outcroppings. Each deviation felt like it was taking us off course, and soon the sun was obscured by canopy and I couldn't tell which direction we were moving. The children's laughter followed us, sometimes close, sometimes distant, always just out of sight. Once I caught a glimpse of something small and pale darting between trees, but when I focused on the spot, there was nothing. "We're being herded," Jen said suddenly, "pushed in a specific direction." She was right. Every time we tried to go one way, we'd encounter an obstacle. A wall of thorny vines, a steep ravine, water too deep to cross. The path of least resistance always led the same direction, deeper into the forest, away from where we wanted to go. "Then we stop playing along," Marcus said. "We pick a direction and force our way through." He chose north, based on some calculation involving shadow angles that I didn't entirely follow, and started pushing through a dense stand of yopon. Jen and I followed, branches scraping our arms and faces. It was slow, exhausting work. The temperature was dropping as afternoon stretched toward evening, and I realized with a sick feeling that we weren't going to make it to the road before dark. We emerged into a small clearing I didn't recognize. In its center stood a structure, an old cabin, maybe a hunter's shack, built from weathered logs and crowned with a rusted tin roof. The windows were dark, the door hanging open. "We should check it out," Marcus said. "Maybe there's a phone, or at least shelter for the night." "No," I said immediately. "No way. That's exactly what we're being pushed toward." "Ella's right," Jen agreed. "This feels like a trap." But even as we spoke, the forest around us erupted with sound. That children's laughter again, surrounding us on all sides, growing louder and more frenzied. And underneath it, a low sound like chanting. Multiple voices speaking in unison in a language I didn't recognize. "Fuck it," Marcus said, and ran for the cabin. We followed because the alternative was standing exposed in the clearing while invisible children laughed and chanted around us. The cabin door scraped open wider as we stumbled inside, and the sounds cut off immediately, leaving only the hammer of our breathing. The interior was a single room, maybe 15 feet square, with a dirt floor and rough wooden walls. A rusted bed frame stood in one corner, a broken chair in another. The air smelled of rot and something else, something I couldn't identify. Sharp and organic, like copper and old flowers. "Look at this," Jen said, pointing at the walls. They were covered in carvings, symbols scratched deep into the wood. Some looked almost like letters, others were geometric patterns or crude representations of figures. Humanoid shapes with too many limbs, circular faces with no features. And names, dozens of names, carved in different hands. Sarah Jenkins, 1987, Mike Torres, 1993, the Hendersons, 2003. "What is this place?" I whispered. Marcus was examining the back corner, where a small opening in the floor revealed a crawlspace beneath the cabin. "There's something down there." "Don't," I started, but he was already crouching, shining his phone light into the darkness. He went very still. Then he straightened up, his face pale. "There are bones. A lot of bones." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 20 degrees. I backed toward the door, my hand finding Jen's arm. "We need to leave, right now." But the door, which we'd left open, was now closed. And when Marcus grabbed the handle and pulled, it didn't budge. "It's stuck," he said, pulling harder. "Or locked. I can't." The scratching started then, all around us coming from the walls, like dozens of fingernails scraping wood, rhythmic and persistent. The carvings seemed to move in the dim light, the symbols writhing, the names bleeding into each other. Jen screamed, pointing at the floor. The dirt was moving, bulging upward in places, something underneath pushing toward the surface. The scratching grew louder, joined now by that chanting voices rising from the earth itself. Marcus grabbed the chair and swung it at the door, the impact splintering old wood but not breaking through. He swung again, harder, and this time a crack appeared. Another hit, and the door gave way, swinging outward. We tumbled out into the clearing, which was no longer empty. They stood in a circle around the cabin. Children, maybe a dozen of them, but wrong. Their skin was too pale, almost translucent, and their eyes reflected our flashlight beams like animals. They wore clothes from different eras, some in modern jackets, others in old-fashioned dresses or overalls. And they were all perfectly still, watching us with expressions that held no innocence at all. "Oh, God," Jen breathed. "Oh, God, oh, God." The children moved as one, taking a single step forward. Their mouths opened, and that chanting came out, but their lips didn't move right, the sounds coming from somewhere deeper than their throats. Marcus pulled out the flare gun and fired it straight up. The bright red light arced into the darkening sky, and for just a moment I saw the children clearly, saw how their forms flickered and shifted, saw the wrongness underneath the child shapes they wore. Then they rushed us. I don't remember deciding to run. One second we were frozen in terror, the next we were crashing through the forest, branches whipping our faces, roots catching at our feet. The children pursued, moving impossibly fast, their laughter now a shrieking cacophony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jen stumbled and went down hard. I grabbed her arm, hauling her upright, and saw one of the children standing 5 feet away. A girl in a yellow dress, maybe 8 years old, with blonde hair that hung in lank strands around her face. She smiled at me, and her teeth were black, rotted to stumps. "Ellie Bird," she said in my grandmother's voice. "Stay and play with us, Ellie Bird." I screamed and dragged Jen forward. Marcus was ahead of us, shouting something I couldn't make out over the noise. We ran without direction, without plan, driven only by blind panic. And then the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I fell, tumbling down a steep slope, hitting rocks and roots, rolling to a stop at the bottom of what I realized was the same ravine we'd tried to avoid earlier. Pain exploded through my left ankle. Above me, silhouetted against the dimming sky, the children stood at the ravine's edge looking down, but they didn't follow. Jen landed beside me, groaning. Marcus half slid, half fell down to join us. "You guys okay?" "My ankle," I gasped. "I think I broke it. Can you walk?" I tried to stand and nearly blacked out from the pain. "No. Jesus, no." Marcus looked up at the ravine's edge where the children still stood motionless. "Why aren't they coming after us?" "Maybe they can't," Jen said. She was examining a cut on her forearm, blood dark against her skin. "Maybe there are rules, boundaries. Or maybe they're just waiting," I said, "waiting for us to try to climb out." Night was falling fast now, the sky above the ravine darkening to purple. We were trapped, unable to climb out with my injury, unable to stay here without water or shelter. The ravine bottom was rocky and narrow, a dry creek bed that suggested flash floods during heavy rain. "We'll wait for morning," Marcus decided. "Find a defensible spot, take turns keeping watch. In daylight we can figure out a way out." We moved deeper into the ravine, looking for a place where the walls offered some protection. The darkness was nearly complete now, our phone lights the only illumination. And as we walked, I heard it again. My name, whispered from the darkness ahead. "Ellie Bird. Come home, Ellie Bird." "It's not real," I told myself, but the words felt hollow. We found an overhang where part of the ravine wall had collapsed, creating a shallow cave maybe 6 feet deep. We huddled inside, backs against stone that still held the day's warmth. Marcus sat at the opening, the useless flare gun in his lap, while Jen tried to stabilize my ankle with strips torn from her shirt. "Tell me about your grandmother," Jen said softly as she worked. "The one who called you Ellie Bird." "Why?" "Because whatever's out there, it's using her memory against you. Might help to remember the real person." So I told her, my voice barely above a whisper. Told her about Grandma Shirley's house that always smelled of lavender and old books, about how she'd taught me to make biscuits from scratch, about the songs she'd sing while we worked in her garden, about the stroke that took her suddenly, leaving me orphaned twice over at 7 years old. She sounds wonderful, Jen said when I finished. She was. And whatever's out there wearing her voice, it's not her. It can't be. But even as I said it, I wondered, what if death changed people? What if whatever came after twisted even the gentlest souls into something hungry and cruel? Marcus jerked upright. Did you hear that? We listened. From somewhere up the ravine came a scraping sound, like something being dragged over stone. It grew closer, accompanied by labored breathing. Stay here, Marcus whispered, moving to the mouth of our small shelter. Don't, I hissed, but he was already edging forward, phone light sweeping the darkness. The scraping stopped. Then a voice called out, male, rough with panic. Help! Please, someone help me. Hello? Marcus called back. Where are you? Down here. I'm hurt. Please. Marcus glanced back at us. There's someone else out here. It's a trick, I said. It has to be. What if it's not? What if it's someone who needs help? Marcus, don't... But he was already moving up the ravine, following the voice. Jen and I looked at each other in the dim glow of my phone light. We can't let him go alone, she said. With Jen supporting most of my weight, we limped after Marcus. The ravine twisted and turned, the walls closing in until we had to move sideways in places. And then we saw him, a man lying on the ground, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, his ranger uniform torn and stained. The dead ranger from the creek, except he was moving, reaching toward us. Thank God, he gasped. Help me, please. It got me. The children. They pushed me. Marcus knelt beside him, reaching out, and I saw the ranger's face in profile, saw the wrong way his jaw hung, saw the glint of white bone through torn skin, saw the vacancy in his eyes despite his desperate words. Marcus, get back, I screamed. Too late. The ranger's hand shot out and grabbed Marcus's wrist. The fingers were cold, the grip impossibly strong. Marcus tried to pull away, but the ranger was sitting up now, his broken body moving in ways no living thing should move. They kept me, the ranger said, his voice changing, deepening, becoming many voices speaking in unison. Kept me and used me and wore me. Now it's your turn. Now you stay and play. Jen didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rock the size of her fist and brought it down hard on the ranger's arm. There was a wet crack and the hand released, but the ranger was still moving, still reaching. So Jen hit him again and again, until the thing wearing the ranger's body finally went still. We ran, or rather, Jen ran, half carrying me, while Marcus stumbled behind us, cradling his wrist. The ravine seemed endless, twisting in impossible ways, and I realized we weren't escaping anything. We were deeper in it now, deeper in whatever pocket of wrongness had claimed this forest. The ravine opened into a wider space, and by the faint moonlight filtering down, I saw why we'd been herded here. The walls were covered in carvings like those in the cabin, and the ground was littered with bones. Animal and human, arranged in patterns I couldn't interpret. At the far end stood a figure, a woman, tall and thin, wearing a dress that might have been white once but was now the color of old paper. Her face was shadowed, but I could see her smile, could see the wrongness of her proportions. Arms too long, neck too thin, fingers like branches. "Welcome home, Ellie Bird," she said in my grandmother's voice. "We've been waiting so long for you to come home." "That's not my grandmother," I said, though my voice shook. "No," the woman agreed, her form flickering, showing something else underneath, something ancient and hungry and patient. But she opened a door once, calling out in grief and loneliness, and we answered. "We've been waiting for you to come back, to finish what she started. What do you want?" "To feed, to grow, to spread beyond this place." The woman took a step forward, and I saw her feet were wrong, backwards, the heels where her toes should be. Lonely children make the best food. Orphans, the forgotten. No one misses them. No one looks too hard. And when they come here, lost and afraid, we wear familiar faces and they come willingly. I thought of all those names carved in the cabin walls, all those people who'd vanished in these woods over the years. Not missing, taken, kept, consumed. "The door," I said. "How do we close it?" The woman laughed, a sound like wind through dead trees. "Close it? Sweet child, you walked through it when you entered these woods. There is no closing it from inside." Marcus was fumbling with something in his pocket. His phone. "Ella, do you remember? Your grandmother, the song she sang?" I didn't understand what he was asking. My mind felt foggy, distant, like I was falling asleep standing up. "The songs," he insisted. "Sing them. She taught them to you for a reason." And suddenly, I understood. Grandma Shirley had been religious in the old way, the way that mixed Baptist hymns with Appalachian folk traditions and half-remembered protection rites. She'd taught me songs, made me memorize them, said they'd keep me safe. I'd thought it was just her way of connecting me to family heritage, but what if she'd known? What if she'd opened that door in her grief after my parents died, and realized too late what she'd invited in? My voice cracked as I started to sing, the words coming back after years of forgetting. "By the river, by the stone, keep the wicked from my home. By the blood and by the bone, let no evil claim my own." The woman's smile vanished. She hissed, her form rippling, showing glimpses of what she really was, a thing of shadow and hunger, wearing stolen shapes like masks. "Stop," she commanded, but her voice had lost its power. Jen picked up the song, her voice stronger than mine, and Marcus joined in on the third verse, though he didn't know the words, just humming the melody. The carved symbols on the ravine walls began to smoke, thin tendrils rising into the night air. The woman shrieked and lunged forward, her arms extending impossibly, fingers like claws. But Jen was already moving, pulling me sideways, and the thing's grasp missed us by inches. Where her fingers touched stone, the rock cracked and blackened. "Keep singing," Marcus shouted. We stumbled forward, past the bone-littered ground, toward a gap in the ravine wall I hadn't noticed before. The song poured out of us, verse after verse, and the forest around us began to change. The trees that had seemed to lean inward were straightening. The shadows that had been too deep were thinning. Behind us, the woman was screaming now, a sound that hurt to hear, and underneath it came other voices. The children, if that's what they really were, crying out in rage and hunger. The gap led to a narrow path, steep but climbable. Marcus went first, then reached back to help pull me up while Jen pushed from below. My ankle was a white-hot agony with every movement, but terror kept me going. We climbed, still singing when we had breath for it, the words of my grandmother's protection song echoing off stone. We emerged onto level ground, and I recognized where we were. The clearing with our RV looking exactly as we'd left it. But something was different. The air felt thinner, less oppressive. The forest beyond seemed like just a forest again, not a hungry, watching thing. "How?" Jen started. "The song," I said. "It must have broken whatever was keeping us trapped, or at least weakened it enough for us to find our way out." Marcus was already at the RV, throwing open the hood. In the moonlight, I could see that the damage we'd found earlier was gone. The wires were intact, the battery terminals clean. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. "Get in," he said. "Now, before it changes its mind." We didn't need to be told twice. Jen helped me into the passenger seat while Marcus threw our scattered belongings into the back, not bothering to organize anything. 30 seconds later, we were moving, the RV bouncing over the rough ground as Marcus navigated by headlights toward where he remembered the access road. I looked back once, out the rear window, and saw them standing at the edge of the clearing. The children, dozens of them now, and behind them the woman in the stained dress, all watching us go with expressions of infinite hunger and infinite patience. One of the children, the blonde girl in the yellow dress, raised her hand and waved. We found the main road 10 minutes later, though it felt like hours. The paved surface appeared suddenly in our headlights, real and solid and gloriously normal. Marcus turned toward what the dashboard compass said was east, and we drove in silence, none of us willing to speak, as if words might somehow pull us back. We stopped at the first gas station we found, 40 miles down the highway in the town of Woodworth. It was 3 in the morning, the fluorescent lights harsh and beautiful. While Marcus filled the tank and Jen called 911 to report what we'd found, the dead ranger, the cabin, the remains, I sat in the passenger seat and cried. The police came, took our statements, looked at us with the kind of skepticism I expected. They'd check out the cabin, they said, look for the ranger's body. But I could tell they thought we were confused, traumatized, maybe high on something. 3 city people who'd gotten lost in the woods and let their imaginations run wild. They let us go around dawn. We drove straight to Baton Rouge, to an ER where Jen's nursing credentials got me seen quickly. My ankle was badly sprained, not broken, though I'd need to stay off it for weeks. They gave me crutches and painkillers and probably would have kept me for observation if I hadn't insisted on leaving. We dropped off the RV at the rental place in Houston that afternoon, Marcus making up some story about engine trouble to explain why we were back early. The employee who checked us in barely glanced at us, bored with the routine of his job, and I felt a desperate envy for that boredom. That was 3 weeks ago. The official story, when it finally came out, was that Ranger David Chen had gone missing 2 weeks before our trip and was found dead from exposure in Kisatchie National Forest. No mention of the cabin or the bones or anything else we'd reported. The investigation was closed quickly, ruled an unfortunate accident. I tried to go back to work, back to my normal life, but nothing felt right. I'd catch myself humming my grandmother's song at odd moments. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. convinced I heard children laughing outside my apartment. And twice now, I've seen something that looked like the woman in the stained dress, standing at the far end of a parking lot or across a busy street, always watching. Marcus won't talk about it. He's thrown himself into work, staying late at the office, avoiding any discussion of what happened. The few times I've tried to bring it up, he changes the subject or makes an excuse to leave. Jen is the only one who seems willing to acknowledge what we experienced. She came over last week, brought coffee and groceries, helped me meal prep since I was still hobbling around on crutches. I've been researching, she said carefully, sitting at my kitchen table. The Kisatchie Forest. There are stories, if you know where to look. People who went missing. Rumors of strange occurrences. Nothing concrete, nothing that makes the mainstream news, but it's there if you dig. How far back do the stories go? As far as I could find. Back to when the Caddo people lived in that area. They had legends about hungry spirits in the forest, places where the dead could speak. The early French settlers reported similar things. And then in the 1800s, when Americans started moving in, she pulled out her phone, showed me a scanned newspaper article from 1887. Look at this. The article described the disappearance of a family, parents and 3 children, who'd been traveling through central Louisiana. Their wagon was found abandoned near what would later become Kisatchie National Forest. The children's bodies were eventually discovered, but not the parents. And the children, according to the article, had been arranged in a manner suggesting ritual purpose. There's more, Jen said. A lot more. Different decades, different circumstances, but always the same area. Always children involved. Always something off about how the bodies are found, when they're found at all. So what are we supposed to do with this information? I asked. Who's going to believe us? I don't know. Maybe no one. But I needed you to know you're not crazy, and neither am I. What we saw was real. What's still out there is real. After she left, I sat for a long time with those articles spread across my table, reading story after story of loss and strangeness in that forest. And I thought about what the woman thing had said, about doors opening, about loneliness and grief creating gaps for things to slip through. My grandmother had lost her daughter and son-in-law in that car crash. She'd been consumed by grief, desperate for any comfort. What had she called out to in her pain? What had she invited in without meaning to? And had she realized in those final years raising me what she'd done? Was that why she'd taught me those songs, drilled them into me until I knew them by heart? A kind of protection, or maybe a key, left for me to find if I ever needed it? I'll never know, but I do know this. That forest is still there, and whatever lives in it is still hungry. It's patient. It can wait decades for the right victims. Orphans, the forgotten, People whose disappearances won't raise too many questions. And I know that I got out, but I didn't escape. Not really, because 3 nights ago, I woke to find muddy footprints on my apartment floor. Small, child-sized prints circling my bed while I slept, and on my bathroom mirror, drawn in what looked like condensation but wouldn't wipe away, a single word in a handwriting I recognized from childhood. Ellie Bird. I've started sleeping with the lights on. I play recordings of my grandmother's songs on loop. I've lined my windows and doors with salt, with iron nails, with every folk protection I can research. My therapist thinks I'm having a breakdown, dealing with trauma through magical thinking. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm the door my grandmother opened, and what's in that forest has finally figured out how to walk through it. Marcus called this morning, the first time we've spoken in a week. His voice was shaking. "I saw one of them," he said. "The children. At the grocery store, just standing in the cereal aisle staring at me. When I blinked, it was gone." "Marcus, what did we bring back with us, Ella? What followed us out?" I didn't have an answer. Still don't. Jen is coming over tonight. We're going to research more, look for answers in folklore and old records and anywhere else we can think to look. Maybe there's a way to close the door, to break whatever connection was formed. Maybe we can send them back to where they belong. Or maybe we're just delaying the inevitable. Because the truth I'm trying not to face is this. The forest didn't let us go. It sent us home. And now, instead of luring victims into those dark woods 1 or 2 at a time, it has access to a whole city full of lonely people, lost people, forgotten people. I caught myself humming the protection song while I write this, and I realize something that makes my blood run cold. I can't remember the last verse. The words that came so easily in the ravine are slipping away, fading like a dream upon waking. How long before I forget them entirely? How long before I hear my grandmother's voice calling me again, and this time I follow? It's dark outside now. The streetlights cast familiar shadows. Normal sounds drift up from the street below. Cars, voices, the ordinary noise of a city at night. But underneath it all, if I listen carefully, I can hear something else. A whisper, a laugh, a voice calling a name I haven't used in 27 years. Ellie Bird. They're waiting. They're always waiting. And sooner or later, every door must open. I just hope that when mine does, I remember the song. Story 5. I'm Jack. I'm 34. I found my own handwriting scratched into a rock at the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina. And that's when I understood that some places remember you before you arrive. The RV had been my father's dream before the cancer took him. A 2019 Winnebago Travato. Sleek and compact, perfect for solo trips into places where cell service died and thoughts could finally breathe. I'd inherited it along with his ashes, which sat in a cedar box on the dinette table, waiting for me to find the right place to scatter them. Uwharrie seemed appropriate. He'd talked about it once, years ago, mentioned the rolling hills and the way the forest felt older than it should. I pulled into the campground on a Thursday afternoon in late September, when the leaves were just starting to turn, and the air carried that peculiar smell of approaching autumn. Damp earth and dying things preparing for sleep. The ranger station was unmanned, just a wooden box with permits and a slot for cash. I filled out the form, stuffed 220s inside, and drove deeper into the forest on roads that twisted like intestines. The campsite I chose was isolated, tucked into a bend where Dutchman Creek supposedly ran, though I couldn't hear water, just trees, oak and pine and something else I couldn't identify, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches creating a canopy so dense that the afternoon sun came through in thin, dusty columns. I parked the RV, leveled it, and stepped outside. The silence hit me first. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat. No birds, no insects. Just the faint creak of the RV settling and the whisper of leaves that moved without wind. I spent the first hour setting up, extending the awning, arranging the camp chairs, building a fire pit with rocks I gathered from around the site. That's when I found the first one. It was smooth river stone, about the size of my palm, and someone had scratched words into its surface. The letters were crude but unmistakable. Jack was here. My handwriting. The same looping J, the same way I crossed my A's. I stood there holding it, feeling the weight of it, feeling the scratches with my thumb. Some kid, I told myself. Some coincidence. Jack was a common name. The handwriting similarity was just my mind playing tricks, finding patterns where none existed. I threw the rock into the woods and heard it hit something that sounded softer than earth. The fire wouldn't light that evening. I tried everything, different arrangements of kindling, different types of wood, even lighter fluid from the RV's storage compartment. The wood would catch for a moment, flames licking upward with that promising crackle, and then it would die. Just smoke and the smell of something bitter, like burned hair. I ate dinner inside the RV, microwaved soup that tasted like nothing, and watched the windows. Darkness came early here, swallowing the forest in stages. First the understory, then the middle canopy, then finally the tops of the trees, until there was nothing but black pressing against the glass. I tried to read, tried to listen to a podcast on my phone, but the downloaded episodes sounded wrong. The voices distorted, speaking slightly too fast, the words overlapping in ways that made my head hurt. I turned everything off and sat in the dim LED light, looking at my father's ashes, wondering what the hell I was doing here. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps. They circled the RV, slow and deliberate, crunching through leaves that shouldn't have been there. I'd cleared the immediate area. Heavy steps, like someone wearing boots, stopping every few feet as if examining something. I sat frozen on the bed, listening, my breath shallow. The steps stopped at the door. Nothing happened, no knock, no attempt to open it, just breathing, wet and thick, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I waited, counting seconds until the breathing stopped and the footsteps resumed, moving away into the forest. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, a tire iron in my lap, watching the windows until gray light began to seep through the trees. Morning brought no relief. The forest looked wrong in daylight, the trees closer than they'd been, their branches reaching toward the RV like arthritic fingers. I stepped outside and immediately saw them. Rocks, dozens of them, arranged in a circle around the RV, each one covered in scratches. I knelt beside the nearest one. The words were different on each rock, but all in my handwriting. Jack came alone. Jack brought ashes. Jack won't leave. Jack is staying. My hands shook as I picked them up, one by one, reading the messages that I hadn't written, couldn't have written. Some were weathered, the scratches filled with moss and dirt, as if they'd been here for years. Others were fresh, the stones still showing raw color where the surface had been scraped away. The last rock, the one directly in front of the door, made my stomach clench. Jack knows what he did. I threw them into the woods, hurled them as far as I could, and got into the RV. The engine turned over after 3 tries, coughing and sputtering, and I put it in gear. The road out should have been simple, back the way I came, following the dirt track until it met the main campground loop. But the road was gone. Where there had been a clear path was now just forest. Trees that hadn't been there yesterday, their roots tearing through the ground, their trunks pressing close. I reversed, turned, tried different angles. The RV's rear camera showed nothing but woods no matter which direction I pointed. I was boxed in. Panic came then, real and animal. I grabbed my phone, no signal, which I'd expected, and tried the satellite communicator I'd brought for emergencies. The screen lit up, but showed only static, white noise that formed patterns if I looked too long. Faces in the static. Screaming mouths. I turned it off and tried to think. The ranger station was maybe 5 miles back. I could walk it, follow the road even if the RV couldn't. Leave the vehicle, get help, come back with a tow truck or whatever it took. The forest breathed around me. I felt it through the RV's walls, through the floor, a slow expansion and contraction like I was sitting inside something's chest. I filled a backpack with water, granola bars, a flashlight, the tire iron. took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The trees watched me. I know how insane that sounds, but there's no other way to describe it. The forest was aware and attentive, and it was focused entirely on me. Every step I took crunched too loud. Every breath echoed. I walked for an hour, following what I thought was the road, but the forest kept shifting. I'd pass a distinctive tree, a lightning-struck pine with a twisted trunk, and 10 minutes later, I'd pass it again. The sun moved in wrong directions. Shadows pointed east when they should have pointed west. That's when I heard my father's voice. "Jack," it called from somewhere ahead. "Jack, I'm over here." My father had been dead for 3 months. I'd watched him waste away, watched the morphine turn him into someone else, watched him stop breathing in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and resignation, but his voice was unmistakable. That rough timbre, the slight wheeze from 40 years of smoking. "Dad," the word came out broken. "I've been waiting for you," the voice said. "Come find me." I ran toward it, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me. The voice stayed ahead, always ahead, leading me deeper. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out, and then I burst into a clearing I hadn't seen before. It was a camp. Old, abandoned. The tent rotted and collapsed, a fire pit filled with bones. And standing beside it, back to me, was a figure in my father's fishing jacket. "Dad?" The figure turned, and it wasn't my father. It wore his jacket, his hat, but the face was wrong. Too long, too smooth, features that moved like wax melting. It smiled with too many teeth. "Jack," it said in my father's voice, "why did you bring me here?" I backed away, the tire iron slipping from my numb fingers. The thing that wore my father's jacket tilted its head, joints bending at angles that shouldn't exist. "You know what you did," it said, and now the voice was mine. "You know why you can't leave." I ran. Branches grabbed at me, roots rose up to catch my feet. I fell, got up, fell again. Behind me, I heard laughter. My laugh, my father's laugh. Other laughs I didn't recognize. The forest was full of voices, all of them mine, all of them screaming. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't work right here. The sun was setting and rising and setting again, the shadows spinning like clock hands. Eventually, I collapsed against a tree, gasping, tasting copper in my mouth. The tree had something carved into it. I recognized the knife work immediately. My Swiss Army knife, the one I'd gotten for my 16th birthday. The same knife that was currently in my pocket. The carving was old, the bark growing over it in places, but I could still read it. Jack Mitchell, age 34, died here September 2025. Below it, in fresher cuts. He brought his father's ashes to hide what he did. My legs gave out. I sat in the dirt, staring at the tree, at my name, at the date that was today's date. The forest breathed around me, and I finally understood. The fight. The last fight with my father, the night before he died. He'd been in pain, begging me to help him, to give him enough morphine to end it, and I'd refused. I'd been angry at him for getting sick, angry at myself for being useless, angry at the universe for this slow torture. I'd said things, terrible things, called him a coward, told him he deserved to suffer. He'd died the next morning, alone, while I was outside smoking and avoiding his room. The ashes in the RV, I told everyone I wanted to scatter them somewhere meaningful. But the truth was, I couldn't face keeping them at home. Couldn't face the reminder of what I'd said, who I'd been in that moment. I'd brought them here to bury them, to hide them, to pretend I'd honored him when really I was just trying to forget. The forest knew. Somehow, this place knew. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Dad, I'm so sorry." The trees leaned closer. The breathing grew louder, and then I saw them. Figures between the trunks. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe, all wearing familiar clothes. I recognized my father's fishing jacket on one, my mother's blue scarf on another, though she was alive and well in Virginia. My childhood dog's collar on something that walked on 2 legs. They were made of bark and moss and fungus. Rough approximations of people I'd known, people I'd hurt, people I'd loved and failed. They moved toward me, their footsteps making that wet, crunching sound I'd heard the night before. I scrambled up and ran again, no direction, no plan, just pure animal flight. The figures followed, their movements jerky and wrong, their borrowed faces expressionless. I burst out of the trees and nearly fell into Dutchman Creek, which was running now, the water black as ink. On the far bank stood the RV. Impossible. I'd run miles, but there it was, right where I'd parked it, the awning still extended, the camp chairs waiting. I splashed through the creek, the water burning cold, and threw myself at the RV door. It was unlocked. I tumbled inside, slammed it shut, threw the deadbolt. The figures stood at the creek's edge, watching. Not crossing, just watching. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing, and that's when I saw it. The cedar box on the dinette table was open, empty. The ashes were gone. A sound made me turn, scratching, like fingernails on metal. It came from everywhere and nowhere. I looked at the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Words were appearing in the RV's surfaces, scratched from the inside, spreading like infection. Jack knows what he did. Jack can't leave. Jack is staying. Jack brought himself here. The walls were covered now, every surface, the words overlapping, spiraling. My handwriting repeated thousands of times. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, and I realized it was coming from me. My hands were moving on their own, scratching at the walls, my fingernails tearing, blood mixing with the words. I couldn't stop. My hands kept moving, carving messages I didn't choose, truths I didn't want to admit. About my father, about the times I'd wished he would just die already, about the relief I'd felt when he finally did, about the ashes I'd planned to dump in the woods like garbage because I couldn't stand the weight of remembering. The figures outside pressed against the windows now, their bark faces leaving sap prints on the glass. They opened their mouths and my father's voice came out, but speaking in unison, a chorus of accusation. You wanted me gone. You were tired of caring. You brought me here to forget. But this place remembers. This place keeps. The RV began to sink. I felt it tilting, the tires pressing into ground that had turned soft. Through the windows, I watched the forest rise up, the trees growing taller, the darkness deepening. We were going down, down into earth that opened like a throat. I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Tried the windows, but they'd sealed somehow, the glass fusing with the frames. The RV groaned, metal bending, walls pressing inward. The cedar box sat on the table, still empty. I grabbed it, held it against my chest, and finally said the words I should have said months ago. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I loved you. I should have been there. I should have been kinder. I was scared and angry, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. The sinking stopped. The chorus of voices fell silent. I sat in the darkness, clutching the empty box, and waited. Dawn came eventually. Real dawn, not the twisted version from before. The RV was tilted, but no longer sinking. The walls were scarred with scratches, but the words had faded. Through the windows I saw the forest was normal again. Distant trees, early light, birds calling. The door opened when I tried it. I stepped out onto ground that felt solid. The figures were gone. The rocks were gone. Everything looked like an ordinary campsite except for one thing. My father's ashes had returned to the cedar box, but now they were arranged in a pattern, formed into words pressed into the wood. I forgive you. Go home. I found the road easily. It was right where it should have been. The RV started on the first try. I drove out of Uharry National Forest as the sun climbed higher, turning the leaves into fire. I scattered his ashes at the ranger station, in the flower bed beside the wooden permit box where they'd be swept up and spread by wind and rain and time, where he'd become part of something living instead of hidden in the dark. The scratches on my hands took weeks to heal. I told people I'd gotten tangled in brush during a hike. The scars on the RV's interior I couldn't explain, so I sold it to a dealer in Raleigh who didn't ask questions about the strange marks inside. Sometimes, late at night, I hear scratching. Just my imagination, probably. Or maybe guilt finding new ways to manifest. Or maybe Uharry National Forest keeps a piece of everyone who brings their darkness there. A small shard that never quite lets go. I don't go camping anymore. I don't visit forests. I stay where there are lights and people and noise, where the silence can't grow thick enough to speak. But I still find rocks sometimes, in my apartment, in my car, in places I know I haven't been. Smooth river stones with messages scratched in my handwriting. Jack came back. Jack didn't learn. Jack is remembered. I throw them away, but they keep appearing. The forest marked me, and the marks don't fade. They multiply. They spread. They wait for me to forget again, to bring new darkness that needs burying. And when I do, because I will, because we all do, the forest will be there, patient and eternal, ready to teach me what I already know. Some places don't just remember you before you arrive. They remember what you'll become after you leave. They carve it into stone and bark and bone, and they wait. They always wait. I'm Jack. I'm 34, and I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase what was written. It just teaches you to live with the scars, to carry them without letting them pull you under. But on nights when the silence grows too thick, when I hear that wet breathing outside my window, I wonder if I really escaped Uharry, or if I'm still there, sinking, while some other version of me drives home believing he's free. The rocks keep appearing. My handwriting keeps scratching messages I don't remember writing. And somewhere in North Carolina, in a forest that breathes and remembers, there's a tree with my name carved into it, waiting for the date to finally come true.